Okay, well, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Morro Bay Planning Commission. This is Tuesday, June 4th, 2019, and with the Veterans Memorial Building at 209 Surf Street. We have all commissioners are present, so we have a quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. Could we please have a moment of silence to begin the meeting? All right, thank you very much. Please stand, face the flag, and we'll begin the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Do we have any planning commissioner announcements? Okay. At this point, we'll open up the meeting for public comment. If you have something that you'd like to say that's not on the agenda, please come forward. All right, we'll close the meeting. Thank you. Okay, we have no presentations. And then the next item is the consent calendar. Does anybody wish to pull any items off of this? I think I'd like to pull A2 if nobody else does, the water report, so we can question that. Okay. Do we have on the rest of the consent calendar, do we have a motion? Do we have any discussion or?
I'll move to approve A1.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion? Nope. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, so let's open up the discussion for the annual water report. This is always fun. So, does anybody else wish to start?
I just had a question. I don't know
Okay.
we're not going to have any presentation on it, obviously.
Not a presentation, we have it on consent, but we have friends. I brought friends. We have our Public Works Director, Rob Levick.
I saw the table in there that said we weren't drawing from the wells, but my understanding was the wells are what feed the desal plant.
Okay, I guess we'll open up for public comment then.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
We have two well fields.
Morro and Choro. The Morro well fields feed the brackish water RO facility at the desal plant. Choro wells haven't been used in years because of minimum flow requirements and high nitrate without a treatment plant to get the water to. So the Morro wells feed the brackish water RO facility for nitrate removal. We only operate those wells when state water gets shut down because state water is a take or pay contract. So we maximize the use of state water. We only bring those wells on as needed. So there's a small use of those wells. Additionally, we operate them once a month for permit requirements, or once a week for permit requirements and testing. So we do operate those wells, just not a whole lot.
Are we doing comments as well as questions?
Yeah, might as well. And then we'll do public comment afterwards.
The only thing that concerns me about it is when you see the chart, it suggests that we're not using those at all. And as a citizen, I didn't speak for the Planning Commission, but as a citizen who spoke against the use of the public lands for potential fracking, one of the things that I'm concerned about is if people see we don't use the well fields, they're thinking our aquifer isn't something we're going to depend on someday, and we already depend on it. So if that's compromised by things that are happening regionally that potentially could damage that, I think it's important to have at least an asterisk in that chart or something that says that water from the RO plant came from our well fields, so that people aren't under the assumption we don't use the river.
We could make that chart clearer, I agree.
Anybody?
And then I had a question. The drought buffer, in the event that we go through another drought and the state water is not available, how long can we use the drought buffer in order to still have water delivered?
So the drought buffer is a mathematical exercise. You take our allocation, which is 1,313 acre-feet a year. You add to it the drought buffer, which I believe is 2,290 or 2,260 acre-feet a year. You come up with a number, and I'm not going to do math without a calculator, and you multiply it times what the allocation percentage is from DWR, Department of Water Resources, State Department of Water Resources. So, but we can never get more than what we can never get more than 1,313 acre-feet a year. So if the state decides we can only deliver 35% of the water, you add those two numbers together, multiply times 35, we're whole. If it's less than 35%, it's less than what our allocation is. We're good to, we typically use about 900 acre-feet a year of state water. So we're good to there before we would have to start relying on local water supply. Now, during the worst of the drought, the state initially came out with a 0% allocation. 0 times whatever number you come up with is still 0. Your drought buffer does you absolutely no good. The only thing that saved us on that was we had water in storage in San Luis Reservoir. San Luis Reservoir is up by Hollister near I-5, somewhere up there anyway. And we can store a certain percentage of our water in that reservoir until kind of the state water system is full. And then it spills. It doesn't actually spill, but it spills on paper. They can fulfill all their needs, and this DWR calls that a spill, and your stored water resets to 0 at that point in time. So it spilled this last January, although no water left the reservoir, and we have no water in storage in San Luis Reservoir now.
We have
0. By the end of the year, we'll have a few hundred acre-feet in storage because we won't take our full allocation because our full allocation assumed a build-out population of some magic number of 12,200, and we're not near that number yet. It's very overly complicated.
Well, I guess I was just...
Maybe I told you more than you wanted.
Well, no, that was very useful. But just so I can understand it in simple terms, in the event of a really serious drought, I'm just curious as to how does the state allocate water resources in a really serious drought when, say, that excess water no longer exists in really banked areas? How do they decide, how much one community should get or another community should get nothing? Or
from the state water project, everybody is on the same playing field. So if it's a 10% year, everybody gets 10% of the water. MWD gets 10% of their 250,000 acre-feet a year, whatever they get. It's a huge amount. Some cities have multiple sources of water. Pismo, for example, they get state water. They're on the Lopez water line, and they have local groundwater. So 3 sources of water. Here in Morro Bay, we're pretty much reliant on state water. We have our 2 groundwater aquifers that are difficult to get water out of without treatment. And the one Morro aquifer doesn't supply enough for the entire city's needs. So we could make do with Morro if we went to a very severe conservation level. nothing like anybody's experienced here. We've been very fortunate or very lucky with our water supply over the past few years, and there has been, excuse me, very limited interruptions on the state water supply. It definitely is an interruptible water supply. At any point in time, there could be a failure. It happens, a few times during the year. A valve will go out. They have to stop their water plant production. That's why we're working on this project to extend our locally available water supply. So I don't think in the near term we're replacing state water with our recycled water, but it'll make a resilient water supply.
Okay, Rob, speaking of the recycled water supply, what are we going to be looking at as far as when the plant comes online and it's fully operational and we're reintroducing it into the Morrow Basin, I believe? What percentage of our water supply will that supply?
Probably will still, as long as we have a take or pay contract with state water, so we get to pay for state water whether we use a drop of it or not. So we'll maximize our use of state water and then use this recycled water supply to meet our peaks and for when state water is not available for maintenance shutdowns or emergency interruptions. That may change, in the next 20 years as we move closer to the termination of our state water contract, and we may want to look at a broader water portfolio.
Okay. As far as water quality goes, this report didn't say anything about that.
And that wasn't the subject of the report.
Right. So, can we... Can you entertain a couple questions on that?
Sure.
Scott? Okay.
I don't know if I'll be able to answer them, but I have friends here too.
Okay. Just for information on that, when do we test at the tap and not at the source for water quality? So my question on that is, in the testing procedures, do we pick up contaminants in the pipeline system, the delivery system?
We test at various locations throughout our distribution system. So not just at the tanks, but we check in the distribution system. And then for two particular contaminants, lead and copper, we actually have a program where we try to recruit citizens to kind of get up in the morning and fill the sample bottle with kind of that first slug of water so that we know what the levels of lead and copper are that come out of the tap. Because the highest source of lead and copper are not the kind of the public distribution systems, but it's those old copper lead soldered pipes that are still in some of our homes in the area. And the way you protect against that is by maintaining a neutral or slightly basic pH in the water so it doesn't get so aggressive and leach out those metals into the water supply.
Okay. And as far as the quality goes, when we shift sources on the treatment, the treatment regimens, are we getting comparable quality water delivered when the sources shift, or is there a measurable decline?
We always supply potable water to the city that meets all health and safety standards. If we didn't, there's procedures Division of Drinking Water requires for notice folks, kind of called a boil order. If it is something were to happen, it would be non-potable, but we always maintain a potable water supply to the city. I think there was one incident in the early 2000s where we did a boil order to the city. We had a pipeline break and caused some contaminations. The disinfection methods as we switch over from state water to local water supplies sometimes change, so we go from using chloramines as our primary disinfection to free chlorine. So during that changeover, you may notice taste and odor changes. Also, if it ever gets hot, I guess it's hot over in the valley, they'll get algae blooms in the state water system that I guess it's best described as an earthy taste to our water that we get usually in September timeframe. It's not a hazardous problem, but it sure makes you not want to drink water.
Okay, any other questions?
Just real quick, I mean, in theory, the RO process is taking out everything.
Down to the pore size of those RO membranes,
Yeah. So the state doesn't test the state water system product as it goes across the valley. I mean, a lot of it's exposed as you go through the Central Valley, right?
Yes, and before it gets here, it goes through a water treatment plant at Polonio Pass, and then is treated water as it gets delivered through the Central Coast.
I didn't know that. That's great to know. All right, thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome.
Okay. Open it up for public comment if anybody wished to speak to this item. We had a discussion on it, so, okay. Seeing none, I'll close that. Okay, so we got item A2 to talk about. Does anybody wish to discuss it or put forward a motion?
I'll move that Planning Commission forward the following recommendation to the City Council to allocate 50 water equivalency units for residential development and 65 for commercial development for a total of 115 WEUs for fiscal year 2019-2020.
I'll second.
Okay. Do we need to call a question on this, or just? Okay. So would like to do a voice, okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion, on the second?
I think it's fine for now. I still don't understand when we do these allocations, when we get the spikes from the visitors, how the commercial, the vacation rentals and the citizens all space out within those allocation formulas. There's a separate commercial and a separate residential. And I don't have the faintest idea how we total those things or know how we are close to, it's very odd.
Well, the better part about this is, as a result of a referendum that was done, and we're doing water allocations based on a source of water we don't use anymore.
Yeah.
We didn't have state water when this started. So, I mean, it's something at some point we need to address and probably stop doing in this manner. I mean, you need to always keep an eye on your water supply and those types of things. I just think that this is probably not the appropriate way to do it, given that it was based on a population that we never reached in 2000 when that was the expected length of the referendum, and again, we have a water supply now that differs from what we had back then. We didn't have state water, so it's.
I think it's very odd to look at like we're granting meters or something. And in effect, we have X amount of water, and it looks like we've got capacity for a little bit of growth in terms of population, but I don't know if those spikes change over time. I don't know.
I mean, we know exactly, I mean, it's in the report, exactly how much water we use, so.
Yep.
I mean, that's clear, and that includes all of the spikes you're talking about and everything else, so. We have adequate water supply.
I'm fine to vote for it. I just think it's an odd mechanism. As you said, we should.
You will get no argument from myself or our Public Works Director.
Yeah, it's governance by referendum isn't always the smoothest method. Also, I don't think we've ever hit the water equivalency allocations that we've allowed in any year, and our consumption just keeps going down even as technology improves. So through gross volume. So, okay. Any further comments or? Okay. Let's all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Okay, thank you, guys. Okay, Moving on to item B1, this is case CDP 19-014 and CUP 19-05. This is for 985 Shasta. Are we ready with a staff report?
We are. Thank you, Chair Liller, members of the commission. You have before you this evening an application at 985 Shasta for a coastal development permit, conditional use permit, for the creation of a bocce ball court and greenhouse structure at 985 Shasta, shown on the overhead there. Zoom in a little bit. This shows the zoning of the site as R4. Property sits outside the appeals jurisdiction and adjacent to the Public Services Building where you pick up your staff reports for this meeting. Here's a picture of the cleared site. Our Public Works Department went out there and removed the weeds from the site a couple of weeks ago, and so that's why it looks. That's the way it looks today. In the background on the slide on the left, you see the Public Services Building. On the right, you see the city-owned house to that structure. Let's see. Here's kind of a site plan layout for it. Again, notice that this is located in the R4 zone. R4 zone does allow for special uses, a special use permit process for certain items, and certain uses that go along with that you can allow for public buildings, parks, and other public recreational facilities, which is one of these. If you go to our special use permit section, which is covered under 1730.030 D4. That's where you identify those items as allowed uses in the zone. You have the plans in your hands there. We're looking at, 2 bocce ball courts and a greenhouse structure. I have is it on this other one? Can't read the dimensions, sorry, from here. It was in the... Apologize. Oh, 12 by 60 bocce ball courts and 15 by 16 greenhouse. I believe the greenhouse is 10 feet in height. So when you go into the special use permit section, it requires planning commission approval, and you sort of set the development standards. It's kind of create your own adventure a little bit there. So you need to do what makes sense. You need to make sure that the use that you're being proposed and the way in which the development is aligned and configured on the lot doesn't encroach or have negative effects on the adjacent neighbors. You don't need to adhere to the R1 development standards, meaning setbacks and those types of things don't apply. You really just need to look at it as it relates to the use. The bocce ball courts are basically flat work. And then the shed is located at about 1 foot 4 inches or 1.4 feet from the rear property line, which again just abuts the city's public building. So there's not really any impact to having it located in that adjacency to the adjacent structure. Parking, there's not any proposed parking here. It would take up the space necessary for the facilities that are proposed. We do have public parking, ample public parking available adjacent, both in the lot across the street behind the library and at the community services building, community center, sorry. We're going to have the 2 folks helping us take care of this. Morro Bay and Bloom is going to enter into a community benefits agreement with the city for maintenance of the greenhouse facility and possibly even maybe maintenance of the grounds on the site for landscaping, but that's yet to be determined. And then Morro Bay Senior Citizens Inc. Will be tasked through a MBA for maintenance of the bocce ball courts themselves. Our recreation department will have a set of bocce balls that are available for the general public, and then Morro Bay Citizens Inc. will have those available for members of their organization, both housed in the community center, caddy corner to the site. Let's see. You are required to make special findings as it relates to the compatibility with the uses when you're doing a special use permit, and that is you want to make sure that the use proposed isn't damage or isn't a nuisance from noise, smoke, odor, dust, vibration, hazard or nuisance from explosion, contamination, fire, hazards occasioned by unusual volume or character of traffic or congregation of a large number of people or vehicles or height of a structure. So those findings are in the resolution for the permit, because I don't think any of those are an issue with the use that's proposed. We did provide a public notice as required, so we put it in the Tribune on May 24th and noticed all property owners and occupants within 500 feet. With that, staff is recommending approval of the project and adoption of Resolution 16-19 and all associated conditions. We also have in the audience another staff member, Kurt Carmichael, our Recreation Division Manager, in case there's any questions related to the inner workings and the agreements that are to come forward, the community benefits agreements for operation of those facilities. Otherwise, staff is available to answer questions.
Okay. Do we have any ex parte communications? Okay, any questions for staff? Okay. Susan?
Is the community center open on weekends? And if not, how do people who want to use these courts on weekends have access to the bocce balls and equipment?
Kurt Carmichael, Recreation Manager. The community center is not open for normal business on the weekends. However, in the event that you do want to rent one of the sets of bocce, they can be picked up Friday and then returned Monday.
Is this a time to make a suggestion?
Sure.
I would see if you could work out something with the visitor center, since they are open on both Saturday and Sunday, and if somebody didn't know Friday they wanted to play, but, I don't know if that's a possibility, but for now, while that center is there, it seems like a good use, and it's certainly close by.
Would require amendment of the contract that we have with the chamber.
Okay.
The bocce set is one of about 5 other recreational items that we do have available, one being like horseshoes and volleyball nets and things like that. So those are also not available on the weekend unless you check them out Friday. Just as a bit of information there for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michael?
I guess I want to zoom out to the other end of things. This was a site the city purchased that had housing on it before,
There were 3 residential units on it.
and this is now R4.
That's the zoning of the property.
So we're taking multifamily residential out of multifamily residential to turn it into parks and rec.
It's city property. I think it was originally acquired along with the adjacent house to serve as we were going to, kind of create a city civic center in that location. Certainly we don't have the funds to do that, so interim use in this area was a garden for a while that was being maintained by some of our local gardening groups. That sort of fell by the wayside, and then this item came up, and our seniors group was interested in the bocce ball court, and then Morby and Bloom, one of our civic organizations, was interested in having a greenhouse, and so these are certainly temporary uses for the sites. R4 is not just housing, remember, it's also hotel, motel, office, it's a commercial designation as well. But the city council, reviewed this issue about a year ago and directed staff to move forward with the permitting on it, so that's why.
Do we have a time frame that we're obligated to this use?
No, the city, when we enter into the agreements with those, we'll have the ability to pull them.
I guess zooming in to follow up on some of Susan's questions, where does somebody use a bathroom if they choose to play here on the weekends? Where's their public restroom close to here?
I don't know that there's a public restroom close to here that's open on the weekend.
The visitor center.
The library?
Library is only open on
Sometimes.
Saturday.
Yeah, not all the
Sunday.
time. It'd be nice to have a sign that told people that restrooms were available.
Yeah, good point.
I remember that being a point when we looked at the bike park down
Yeah.
on Main Street. A lot of nice little kids running around having refreshments. Nature's going to take its course. I imagine with the older folk too. No, I used to live in Baltimore where we had a major bocce population, and it was delightful to watch folks playing the game. So I don't have any trouble
Okay,
with
no.
the use.
More questions?
I was just wondering if the drainage system that you're contemplating, is that roughly the same as if the paving was a typical water permeable sort of paving, or?
The drainage design is designed to convey water to the street, I believe. and a little bit to some of the adjacent landscape areas that are on the site. It's both.
Oh, so it's not intended to sort of take the water and sort of,
The issue with the property is that it drains towards the back corner. That's a problem. And so you have to have subsurface drainage to get it out to the curb, to collect most of it, and then there's also the ability for it to, perk on site. There's both.
Yes.
I had a couple questions. How are we going to regulate the use? I mean, is there going to be like a sign-up sheet? I mean, do folks just, I mean, I'm sure there's hours of operation. You can't be there after 10, hopefully at night, or maybe even earlier than that. So, I mean, what are the regulations going to look like as far as that goes?
I think just up front, the basic regulation would be consistent with other park facilities that we have here in town, dawn to dusk, where it's open and available. As far as accommodating large numbers of people and how they would, I don't know, I guess wait their turn to play, that hasn't really been defined. We right now have a group of about 10 seniors that are actively involved in bocce. But I think when we get down to that point, if we find that it's going to be such a huge attraction that it's going to warrant something like that, then we can certainly, print up signs to help define how to use the facility.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's great what you're doing.
Yeah.
And kind of piggybacking on the bathroom idea, if it's possible, I know there's probably water on site. If a water fountain would be available, that would be great. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. So.
Okay, thank you.
I noticed that we have a greenhouse there for gardening, but I didn't notice any gardening plots or raised beds or anything. Or is that being planned for the future, or is that not going to be allowed, or what are your plans on that?
The intent of the project is to place the two bocce courts on the parcel along with a greenhouse, and the greenhouse's purpose is for the group Morro Bay and Bloom to help to propagate plants so that they can use those to use them to beautify the city. Additionally, they're looking at possibly holding some classes with our senior center on how to work with plants and do all that plant stuff. But as far as any raised beds, anything further on that property, no, this is the extent of the design.
Are you open to working with them if they wish to have, seed beds or, to be able to propagate in the planters or doing other planters there?
I'm certainly open to it.
Okay.
The conversations I've been having were basically everything would be contained inside the greenhouse without any outside the greenhouse planting other than to beautify again the neighborhood or the city.
All right. At this point, we'll open it up for public comment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So anybody wish to speak to this item, please come forward.
Hi, Sean Green, Morro Bay. I lived on Dune Street, just a couple blocks down from this site. This property is zoned, I drive by it every day, and it's been kind of in disrepair for 3 or 4 years, so the prospect of anything happening there is somewhat encouraging. Whether it's this project or not, I'm not really sure. The site is zoned R4, has no parking per code. We're having to find off-site parking to accommodate this use. There is no bathroom. There is a proposed accessory building of sorts that's twice the size of the standard 120 square foot accessory shed, although a greenhouse may be slightly different classification than an accessory shed. It's also proposed within the setback of an R4, standard R4, and we're proposing a special use for an R4 zone. If this was proposed by a private citizen, those kinds of exceptions obviously wouldn't stand a chance in front of this commission. So I think there may be something to think about there. Similarly, the city would almost certainly not seek out a property of this size or type or anything for the purpose of building a bocce court. So keeping that in mind, I think that it is important to note that between that empty site and the adjacent house, we're looking at $750,000 worth of disposable assets for the city that, if disposed of, is now the responsibility of somebody else who is more likely than us to upkeep it. And it satisfies some multifamily needs, et cetera. So I'm pretty against this proposed use. The 1% of me that's okay with it would encourage you to consider some sort of welcome to Morro Bay signage on the corner, given that it is one of maybe 10 kind of arteries into the city. So if you are going the bocce route, which I hope we don't, maybe add a sign to the corner that says something about Morro Bay.
Okay, thank you. Next, please.
My name's Betty Winholtz, and I agree with the concerns that the previous speaker raised. I think that there is a higher use for this property, and it did used to have the 3 units for apartments, and the city actually allowed that to decay and then tore them down. They were purchased because they were going to build a civic center. I don't know if that is still in the process or not, but it seems to me that this should be a temporary condition project, and that you need to condition it and you need to make it temporary so the higher use can be come to fruition at some point in the next 3 to 5 years or whenever. I think you do need to be conscious of the house next door, even though it's owned by the city. It is rented out, and it is an R1, and so I think you need to be conscious of the noise, and therefore the hours that was asked about previously. And I would disagree that there is ample parking. If you ever go down to the community center on a weekend or even during the week, sometimes the parking lot is just jammed full, and it overflows into the library parking. And so now you're pushing cars into the residential neighborhood, which already has parking on the street. So I think you need to maybe explore parking further, because I disagree that it's all available. I think that if the shed is for the dedication to Morro Bay and Bloom, I think they should have to pay for it to have it built or build it themselves, and that should not be a cost to the city. I understand that they donate their time, but as a nonprofit, the city still gives them money for all the things that they plant. And now we're giving them a shed. And that's, as a member of Morro Bay Beautiful, when we do things for the city, we don't ask for money in return. So I think that there's a little bit more that Morro Bay and Bloom could put into this. I believe that also, and I didn't see, and maybe there is, that there should be seating available, some kind of benches for people who are waiting to take their turn. Maybe that's there. And I do have a concern about the drainage, and it seems to me, I thought it was a state ordinance now, and maybe it doesn't apply to city property, but that your runoff, your drainage has to stay on site. And so if you're running it off to the street, I don't know if that's okay or not. And I think it's a really good idea, again, to condition the project, to let people know where the restrooms are, where they can get the equipment, that they can get it at the visitor center or wherever. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, please. Okay, gone. Okay, we'll close public comment. Okay, bring it back to the commission. Does anybody wish to comment? Jesse?
Yeah, I'll go first. So this is a temporary use, as I understand it, and I think you're absolutely right. There is a higher and better use for this property, and the city council will make that decision at some point in the future, I assume, what they want to do with this property. But in the meantime, leaving it blank and doing nothing with it just doesn't seem to be the highest and best use immediately. So I do agree that a temporary use permit is appropriate, which is exactly what's in front of us. And I think it could be better, sure, but I mean, doing nothing is silly.
Scott, let me ask you, is this a temporary use or is this a final use?
Well, the amount of improvements that we're putting into the site are not substantial. They're fairly minor improvements, in that it would be available for the city to use as just about anything later on down the road, including the city could choose to sell it. It would take about the same amount of time to remove the facilities from this that it did to clear it from the weeds. Mm-hmm. They're not, again, substantial improvements that are being put in there, and that's purposeful. This seemed like a good use, seemed like a public benefit to have the use here, and it was nice that we had some of our civic organizations willing to sponsor and maintain them. And I think that's the council's take on it and why they directed staff to move forward with it.
And then one more clarification, what I saw in the plans is the greenhouse is not included in the contract. So I assume that it would be supplied by
I believe that is my understanding, but I think Kirk might have a more specific answer for
Okay,
you.
we'll open up public comment for the staff.
Thank you again. The Morro Bay and Bloom is responsible for providing the greenhouse. The city is putting down the decomposed granite pad for it. So they're seeking grant funding right now to cover the cost of the greenhouse entirely.
Okay, great, thank you for the clarification. Joseph?
I think it's a good idea to sort of eliminate what was previously an eyesore by doing some kind of development that the whole community is going to benefit from. Intuitively, I think the parking will not be a problem, but we could certainly work out a solution should it turn out to be a problem, given more than expected popularity and use of the facility. I see here on the design that it says the tables and benches and planters are shown for illustrations only. I took that to mean the location was, but there were going to be tables. So I'm not quite sure, but my assumption was that the plan was actually including tables and benches. I do like the idea of the sign, with the very minimum, would designate that it's open to the public and that this is where you can obtain the necessary equipment. And as I asked earlier, I think I'd support more of the use of granite so that more of the water would soak into the soil and less of it would drain to the street, but I'll defer if that thwarts the idea of eliminating a kind of a swampy area at the back of the property.
Okay. Susan, any comment?
I agree with what's been said. I really believe in signs. So I do like the idea of something that points out where restrooms would be, that it is a bocce ball court. There are lots of us who've never even seen it, so I wouldn't know. And I really would like to explore the idea of having the equipment available on the weekends, because people don't always plan ahead. So if that's something that the visitor center could accommodate, at least while they're where they're at.
Yeah.
And I agree that, if we're looking towards the future for this being either back to residential or a grand city hall when we all become solvent, that would be great.
Okay, Michael?
Yeah, I'm like some of our audience, I'm conflicted because it's a great residential location. It's close to the schools, it's close to shopping, it's close to transit. It's ideal to be a multifamily residence, but it's also across the street from the library, next door to civic offices, within walking distance of the visitor center and the community center. So there's sort of it's at a joint between two beautiful little possibilities there. I don't remember in our zoning what we had prophesied for that area. I know we had talked about some of those areas that were residential multifamily having higher capacities. So I think because it's been described as a temporary project, I'm fine to go ahead with it, because I think something there is better than nothing there. And I think we'd probably be 2 or 3 years out till we got something there if we did something else. But I would certainly not, for the record, I want to go on the record saying I don't think it's a permanent park. I don't think that's the best and highest use for it.
Yeah, I'd pretty much agree with it. I'm not really, I'm going to like seeing something there, getting some usage out of it, because it's just basically been a weeded lot, for as long as I can remember. And, I'm not sure we're going to have the battle of the bocce ball gangs there, and with blaring music and late into the night. So I really don't think this is going to be a public hazard. As far as parking, we'll see how the use goes. If it becomes a problem, then I think it will need to be addressed, and that's what will come back to us for that. So I think creating some signage to say what the usage is, that it is a public court, that it is, the equipment is available, and should that be a condition in the use, or can that just be a?
If you'd like, you can add that as a condition. I have no problem with that. I think we would have had signage up there anyway, speaking to these things, but I mean, we can put it in there so everybody knows we're supposed to have it.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm happy with that.
Okay, I think we should condition it for signage to be approved by by you, the community director.
Okay.
And,
Does the city have any plans for these properties in the long term?
Well,
I mean, it is a lot of money to be sitting on.
The city council has directed us to bring back an item for consideration that's going to look at, again, we've done this a few times since I've been here, to look at all the city-owned properties and any of them they want to dispose of or what they want to do with them. And so we'll be doing that. It came out as part of the budget discussion that we had recently. So.
Yeah, if it's not generating funds, it seems like the city would be best to look at divesting of it.
yeah, but there's also the acquisition costs in the future will be a lot higher than the maintenance cost of it now, too. So, yeah. And, Michael, if I remember in our zoning, this was zoned for community public use, such as a community center, such as our fire station and, our senior center and stuff. So I don't, personally, I don't have a problem with this as a temporary use, and I think it'd be good to get some activity there. So do we have anybody else care to put a motion forward or further discussion?
Well, I will move that we approve Coastal Development Permit CDPP 19-014 and Conditional Use Permit CUP 15-05 with the amendments of the, as discussed, sign, and I guess, I don't know if it needs to be explicit, if necessary, explicit that it's a temporary development.
Okay.
Can we add that we make it very clear that it's open to the public?
Yeah, I think, in my understanding, that the signage should state explicitly a direction for where the restrooms are, that it's open to the public, and some direction as to where the equipment can be acquired to play.
Okay, any further additions on that, or? The one thing I'd like to say is that we allow a use of space for future gardening projects. I mean, I could see a couple areas that could be used for community gardens for food, for supplemental food and stuff like that. There's several areas, and that could actually be helpful in the landscaping of the area. So just as long as we don't preclude that with this plan.
Originally that place was gardened by a number of gardening groups, and they had fruit trees in there that were, I don't know what happened to all those trees, whether they just weren't cared for, and
I don't know.
but it did get pretty sad.
At some point,
over time.
those groups stopped taking care of the property and just became overgrown, and so.
Okay.
And we did allow folks before before they went through and cleared it to take any plants they wanted, so.
Okay, so we have a half a motion here.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. So we got a motion and a second. Any discussion on it? Okay. Call the question, please.
Commissioner Lucas. Aye. Commissioner Stewart.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Ingraffи.
Aye.
Chair Lure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item number B2. This is case number CUP 18-06 and CDP 18-008, and it's PKG 18-01. And this site location is 1130 Scott Street, and of course in Morro Bay. And Scott, what is the PKG designation on that?
Parking exception.
Okay, thank you. What's that? I'm sorry. Okay. Do we have any ex parte communication then? Jesse?
Yes, I have an ex parte communication. I met with the architect and the owner of the property on Saturday.
I met with the architect and owner last night, and I've also talked with a few of the neighbors. Paula Radke is on the other side of the property, and talked with Sean Green, who's one of the neighbors, this afternoon.
Okay.
And I've talked with Nancy.
Okay, great. Let's go with the staff report at this point.
Okay, a couple of things. There were public comment, which I handed out to you and are also on the table in the back for the public. And there is an error in the staff report that I want to point out. Actually, I'd rather not point out, but it's there. It's in the subject on the front page. The second line from the bottom off to the right, it says C1 PDSP, and it's really C2. And I think everywhere else in the report that I could find, it was correct, but wrong on the cover. All right. So this site is located on Scott Street, and it's across the street from Carla's Kitchen. The lot is small. It's a 40 by 56, 2,240 square feet. It's undeveloped. It appears to have some old site improvements, deck, Hollywood driveway to Scott Street. I'm not sure if it used to be part of the artist studio that's on the second half of that through lot, or if it was a separate development. The summary of the proposed development is a 3-story building with interior space of 3,497 square feet, divided up into commercial space of 925 square feet, residential space of 2,572 square feet. There are also residential decks of 1,132 square feet. The parking provided is one covered and enclosed garage space for residential and one tandem open space behind that garage space. And for commercial, there are 2 open spaces. The zoning is C2, plan development and SP. And so the zoning C2 allows commercial uses intended for heavier types of commercial and semi-industrial uses, not dependent on pedestrian traffic. Residential allowed in the C2 zone is security units only. And the zone is intentionally not near residential districts because of the adverse impacts of the intended heavy commercial use. The plan development allows for modification of the development standards if such action results in a better design or other public benefit, provided that the specific design criteria of the general plan or land use plan applicable to the property is not exceeded. The land use designation, the site zoning, this is the specific plan. Beach Street area specific plan provides for consideration of outdoor storage, offensive odors, light and glare, etc. Generally conditions resulting from heavier commercial use. Beach Street specific plan area, this shows the site. You can see that this street really functions a little more like a commercial alley. Beach Street specific plan area allows Planning Commission to approve parking in lieu fee if parking cannot be provided on site. The land use designation is service commercial, specifically stating that the intent is to reserve space for service commercial businesses that are not compatible in residential neighborhoods. And I think the original intent was for businesses that were servicing the fishing industry and other dock-related businesses. The overview of the proposed project, this is the floor plan of the ground floor, which is in the hashed area in the center is commercial with ADA bathroom. The top is residential garage space, and the bottom is the residential stairs. This is the second floor plan. This is 1,416 square feet of residential and 380 square feet of residential decks. The residential interior space includes a living room, kitchen, and a bathroom. And what happened? There. All right, we're back. Third floor, 782 square feet of residential, 140 square feet of residential decks. The purple area is the bedroom, bathroom, sitting area, and at the top right is residential storage, and off to the right is the third floor deck area. Roof level, the blue area is the residential roof deck, 612 square feet. This is the development standards for the zones. C2 standards are met through this development. It does not exceed any of the setbacks. I did want to mention in the rear setback, the adjacent artist studio building encroaches on this site, and they've set back the building 2 feet 2 inches, which is 8 inches from that adjacent building, which has sliding glass door on the back, but it's my understanding that there is a change that's going to occur with that sliding glass door. This project requires a parking exception because the residential parking of that size of residential unit would require 2 covered and enclosed parking spaces. 1 covered and enclosed is provided and another is an open tandem space. The commercial parking, the applicant assumed 1 space per 500 square feet of commercial, which is 2 parking spaces. 1 of those will have to be a van accessible space, which is not shown on the plan yet. The commercial parking will be determined once a tenant is identified. I think the 500 square feet per parking space is a reasonable estimate. Parking exception can be granted upon the following findings: that the exception will not constitute a grant of special privilege inconsistent with the driveway or parking limitations on other properties in the vicinity. This is the property immediately to the south. And as you can see, the design of the parking, it has a 2-car garage, but there are 3 parking spaces in the driveway that are also directly adjacent to the sidewalk. The other findings are exception will not adversely affect the health, safety, or general welfare of persons working or residing in the vicinity, and no traffic safety problems will result from the proposed modification of parking standards. This exception is reasonably necessary. The exception is reasonably necessary for the applicant's full enjoyment of uses like those upon adjoining real properties. Staff recommendation, and this is really because this is my first project where I'm not recommending approval, and the reason is that the proposed project ratio of commercial to residential does not seem reflective of the zone code or the land use ordinance intent for the primary use to be commercial. The zone and the land use require that the only residential use in this zone is security unit, so residential for security purposes. There are design changes that might improve the parking situation, but generally the parking exception seems necessary and reasonable given the findings and the existing conditions in the area. And it's staff's recommendation for denial of the conditional use permit, coastal development permit, and although I wouldn't have a denial for parking exception, I don't think you can have a parking exception without the others. And recommends that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 11-19.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. Questions? Michael?
Nancy, one of our correspondence pieces talks about a height exception. There's no height exception on this.
No.
It's within the zone.
They're within the height.
If the use was changed to the second floor being commercial, can we assume that the parking requirements would be doubled based on what's there now? We'd be looking at 4 spaces, including the handicapped access ones.
If there was more commercial space, yes.
And we'd have to trigger the ADA elevator issue.
I think there would be an access issue.
And
There
potentially-
was another application, I think, in 2006, that was 50/50. So it was approved for this site, but it was half commercial and half residential, and it had, I think, a couple of parking in lieu fees because they couldn't get all the parking on the site.
Okay, thanks.
Joseph?
I'm looking at the neighboring property to the south, which I'm assuming has the same zoning. Do you know anything about, that may be a wrong assumption, but if it is, do you know anything about the history of how that structure came to be built?
I don't. I think I looked it up, but maybe I didn't find anything specific there. It is the same zoning.
Okay. And then the other question is, and again, I was wondering myself, how do you maintain these commercial buildings with zero setback? How is that addressed typically? I mean, if you...
You mean, how do you paint the wall?
Yeah.
I guess if you have zero setback and your neighbor has zero setback, you don't worry about it. I mean, their design is a CMU building, so a CMU building, maybe you're supposed to seal the CMU every once in a while, maybe you just pour stuff from the top.
So if we were looking at this a different way, what would it take, or is it even possible for this to be, for the zone to be, the zoning to be changed? So would it require a general plan amendment, or what exactly could happen there, or?
You'd have to change the general plan land use map and the zoning map, and the zoning that goes along with it.
So it'd be a general plan amendment and a zone change
It would be a
request?
general plan, local coastal program amendment, and an implementation plan amendment. The implementation plan is the city's zoning code.
And as I understand,
Basically.
the bigger picture here is, there's several of these properties in this general vicinity that kind of have the same problem where it's really tight, and is that possible? Is that something that the city's willing to entertain?
Well, I mean, there's a process that we'd have to go through, but then you have other commercial uses that are over here. And the city's had this conversation. The Planning Commission specifically had this conversation when we reviewed the zoning, and we didn't change it as it relates to the zoning update. So, in fact, one of the reasons we're sitting here is one of the things the commission expressed a concern about was these ones that were sort of a wink and a nod to having any commercial space whatsoever. And in fact, we have a couple properties, or at least one over here, that has a condition on it, maybe even a deed restriction, that requires them to maintain an active business license, which is almost unenforceable. It's a one-off thing. I mean, somebody have to remember that that's the requirement of it. And I know for a while that one residential structure wasn't maintaining it, and then we went through an enforcement action to make them maintain it and have a business there. And so it's been kind of an ongoing thing. So again, it was more of a, you get this wink and a nod thing where you have in this instance, a 2,500 square foot house with some vague commercial space that's supposed to be used for some sort of commercial thing.
So, okay.
I'm not saying I have great answers for it. That's unfortunate, I think, the way that this has happened over here, but certainly this is in front of you, one, because of the recent conversations we've had with the Planning Commission, and really the uses aren't mostly related to commercial, they're mostly related to residential, at least the square footage is like double.
Any questions or?
So one of your concerns was about the ratio of commercial space to residential space, but do we have anything in the codes that establishes what that should be in an area like this?
The C2 zone specifically says the only residential allowed is a security unit.
But it doesn't give size.
No, but in other zones where they allow residential, they, I think, clearly state, if you look through the past amendments of the zoning code, that the commercial be primary. And they describe it to be primary with residential as secondary in the back or on the second floor. But strictly interpreting that, then someone could say, well, it is on the second floor and the third floor. But I think primary is meant to be 50%.
Okay.
And this is a small site, and that would be challenging, because commercial on a second floor would be a tough thing, I think, to rent.
Yes. And I think to be able to do that, you would lose a lot of what's on the first floor. And you actually lose a lot on the first floor with the garage. You know, that's quite a significant space, and if you had to put in, I think that they suggested 10 by 10 feet for a elevator that would accommodate the emergency services requirement. Then you really get small on the first floor, and it's like, what could you do with that?
And the last project that was approved on this site, I think, was 1,300 square foot commercial, 1,300 square foot residential, and parking in lieu fees, so that you didn't use any of the valuable
Right.
interior space for parking.
Okay.
Okay, just a second. Michael, did you have any questions? Yeah. Jesse?
It occurred to me that if we have a security unit, so this residential unit is for security purposes, then would it be possible to only require one parking space, because presumably you only have one security guard at a time?
It's designed as a residential unit, a single bedroom.
Right, but if you had the single residential requirement to have a single spot, you don't have to have the tandem, so that whole first floor could be commercial.
I think our parking requirement requires parking based on size of the residential unit. So if it
I
was
see.
less than 1,000 square feet, you're right, it will be one space.
So Nancy, how many areas do we have in this town that are zoned for heavy-duty commercial or industrial use? I think we have very few, don't we?
I would say this area and on Quintana.
Yes, we have some on Quintana,
And there's a little bit there on 41 by,
yeah.
by Hayward there.
Yeah, and some of that is
Miners.
in that area is also M1 as opposed to the C2.
Okay. So we have, this is a very limited, zone that we have to service the city on that. Okay. We'll open this up for public comment. Would the applicant like to come forward and speak to this item?
But all right. Good evening, Chairperson, Lure, Commissioners. My name's Emily Baranek. I'm with Jade Architecture, agent for the owner. The project team is here as well this evening to answer any questions or provide background as needed, including the owner, Travis Kinney, architect Allison Edwards, and planning consultant Kathy Novak. Thank you for your time this evening, and for those of you who met with us on site this week, thanks again. We also want to thank staff for the presentation and the efforts to date. We've been working on this a long time, and we appreciate it. Respectfully, however, we disagree with the findings and with the recommendation for denial. I hope this evening to clarify a few points and add emphasis to a few others with the presentation, but promise to keep it brief. Our primary point this evening is that the design presented is the best option for the parcel and the neighborhood specifically, and that approval is supported by code. As mentioned before, 1130 Scott is a very challenging site in a unique neighborhood. It remains undeveloped for many of these reasons that we're talking about this evening. At just over 2,000 square feet, roughly the 40 by 50 or 55, 56 as mentioned, it is unusually small. I determined roughly the same size as this assembly hall. Hopefully, those of you who didn't have a chance to make a site visit were able to drive by and noted that the parcel is only the undeveloped area between the fences and the buildings. Those buildings that it's bordered by are of different uses and different building types, including one to the south, which is similar and I think has been shown before, and one to the east, which was mentioned, that's older and actually encroaches on our parcel, reducing its effective size. The parcel fronts Scott, let's see, I'm getting ahead of myself. Fronts Scott, which is minimally improved between beach and surf and is burdened with haphazard parking from the surrounding uses, which on this street alone include hotel, restaurant, light commercial, industrial, as well as single-family and multifamily housing. However, I think you'll find that the residents love this eclectic mix. We've heard that numerous times, as does Travis, the owner. He also loves the lot. His original plan was to relocate his hot rod shop from Atascadero to this location. So after extensive work with staff, we submitted this project feeling that it met nearly all the zoning and land use regulations last September under the business name Hollywood's Hot Rods, which is one of the businesses he operates. Since submittal, though, he's decided to work through approval of the overall project without customizing the commercial space or specifically approving a particular commercial use. As I said, he operates multiple other businesses, and other family members operate still other businesses and have ideas for this space. So we revised the project name to Kenny Commercial and proceeded with review of a general commercial use. Knowing full well that whether it be Travis or one of his family members or a potential future tenant, they and their new use would either need to meet the C2 requirements or come in for a CUP, modifying this one. The proposed project is a 3-story building with first floor commercial and single-family residential security unit above. Our total, however, is 2,198 conditioned square feet. Staff mentioned 25 this evening, so we may need to review the numbers again. We arrived at this configuration after multiple iterations. We explored parking the entire site and elevating the commercial use on like a podium. But the city standards for driveways and commercial parking lots don't work on sites this small. We tried many combinations of commercial and residential square footages that all either resulted in ADA or emergency egress issues or required additional parking. We did seriously consider the previously approved design offered by staff. We went so far as to begin a complete redesign based on it, just to discover that it didn't meet current code requirements specifically for parking and would not in fact be supported by staff. In the end, or I should say, in fact, the site is so small that every modification we made resulted in conditions requiring further solution. In the end, we came back to this design because it is what we feel is best and it is what Travis prefers. Our wish had always been to bring a quality design to Planning Commission with staff approval, but we're here tonight because we believe this strikes a balance between the constraints, the code requirements, and the owner's needs in the most successful way we can, necessitating only minor exceptions. Exceptions were requested to allow for tandem residential parking and to permit a 35-foot driveway, which allows us to retain all required commercial and residential parking, including an ADA space on site. At 35 feet, it would still meet the requirements for a commercial driveway and is similar in size and proportion and design to the driveway immediately south. As noted in the staff report, other lots in the area have parking opportunities on frontage streets that ours do not. And while staff has proposed off-site parking and payment of in lieu fees to avoid the exception and free up commercial square footage, the owner feels strongly that it's not a good option for this neighborhood for its potential additional parking impacts on the surrounding neighbors. Additional commercial square footage also has the potential adverse effect of requiring additional parking. Since we found commercial would not work on the second or third floors through some of the things that staff mentioned and you discussed and asked questions on already, it made sense for the allowed single-family residential security unit to utilize the second and third floors of the site. The proposed single-family dwelling is allowed by code and is a one-bedroom unit designed to meet the owner's open concept style of living. As was gone over earlier, it's an open kitchen, dining, and living on the second, with bedroom, sitting, and storage on the third, both of which have decks. The total square footage of the decks is 1,132, but only 160 of that is covered. 770 square feet of that is uncovered and could not be used, throughout the year. The design provides flexible commercial space that works for industrial uses that Travis is interested in, retains all required parking on site, and as was a priority of his from the get-go, and provides the single-family residential unit for Travis or any future building tenant should they decide to lease it. The C2 zone specifically allows for, as was mentioned, a residence or one residence for security purposes. Staff has stated that the regulation is ambiguous, but code provides clear definition for a residential security unit as a single-family dwelling located to the rear half or on the second story of a commercial use. This is not ambiguous. It's broad. A single-family dwelling can be many sizes or configurations, and we argue that the use of this broad term was intended to allow for flexibility to design a residential unit that a family would actually want to live in while caring for their own or someone else's business. The secondary nature of the residential unit was questioned as well, but by this definition, this unit is secondary by virtue of its location on the second and third floors. Staff also provided extensive analysis of the commercial and residential square footages and floor area ratios. However, nowhere in the zoning regulations, definitions, or district plans are there requirements for or limitations on those square footages or ratios. We believe that this single-family dwelling meets the definition of the residential security unit. We believe the overall design meets the requirements of the C2 zone, with minor exception. And moreover, we believe the residential use and the required exceptions are actually supported by the local coastal plan, PD overlay, and Beach Street specific plan. The local coastal plan specifically for the mixed use area F recommends a mixture of all uses as appropriate to be evaluated on a parcel by parcel basis. Residential uses already exist in this neighborhood successfully, and residential units are in very short supply. This location is appropriate, and this use permit process allows for the necessary parcel by parcel review. The planned development overlay zone additionally is intended to allow for modification of the development standards where it would result in a better design or public benefit. This is a better design than was previously proposed. The one that was previously proposed and approved did not get built, for any number of reasons, but I would propose that it was because it wasn't actually viable. And on a side note, the PD overlay may presumably allow for the commission to approve a reduction in parking, as was being previously discussed. The Beach Street specific plan as well goes so far as to encourage preserving and enhancing a diverse mix of uses that exists in the area already, stating that it was that surprisingly cohesive character that warranted a specific plan rather than reliance on a conventional zoning regulation. Again, Scott Street's a very difficult area. It's a difficult site, which is why it remains vacant. We feel this is the best design for it. We feel it's viable. It's a unique neighborhood, but based on communications we've had thus far and communications I believe have been sent to commission, the neighbors support it and they like the design. As staff graciously put it, the architectural design is industrial modern and would be one of the more attractive buildings on the site or in the area. We hope that you'll consider this an ideal design as we do after the effort we've put in and agree that there is support for approval. I guess we appreciate your time and consideration this evening and are here for further questions and comments.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We'll hear the rest of public comment, and if we have any questions, we'll call you back up.
All right. Thank you.
Do we have anybody else that wish to speak to this item?
Thank you. Sean Green. I own a lot on Scott Street, so I can certainly attest to the difficult nature of designing something for these parcels. The city played a role in creating kind of this burdensome situation for lot owners simply by allowing the lot splits of these street-to-street lots. There are just a handful of us that have these. And just going through maybe, I don't know, 500 to 1,000 rounds of parking design plans on my own lot. It's so difficult, and I appreciate the staff's consideration of the parking exception particularly. The 35-foot driveway is a must to allow 3 straight-in parking spots to go in and out, because obviously turning around is not a possibility. The value of a tandem spot, I don't know, just to make someone put it together, a tandem spot seems a little silly, especially when almost no tandem spaces are ever used in tandem. On that same note, something appearing on paper versus in practice, most of the Scott Street, most is maybe not the right word, there are many faux businesses on Scott Street and West Street that have just emerged over time, partly by necessity based on the code and the size of the lots, partly based on what Scott said, kind of a wink and a nod situation. So I particularly appreciate this applicant's straightforward nature in which they're bringing this plan to the commission. A couple additional things that I wanted to mention regarding the security residence. I think staff mentioned that it is pretty clear what that means, and I don't really think that that's the case. When I first bought my lot, they said it was a 49% maximum square footage of the residential portion, and I just took that as gospel. And now that this has come up, I kind of come through everything, and it doesn't really seem to be as straightforward as the impression is. I think there's a primary versus secondary debate that's worth having. And secondary could very well be defined as the top or the rear of the building, which has also been relayed to me by city staff. So that argument may be a fair one. Whether that's a 75%, 25%, as this applicant is proposing, or a 51-49, or whatever that is again up for debate. What I don't think a security residence is in 2019 is a security guard in a twin bed. So their argument that a single-family residence, something that would be adequate for someone to live, maybe with a family above their business, is a fair argument that I think that you might want to consider. Anything else I want to mention? I think that's about it. 35-foot driveway. Good luck.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, please.
Betty Winholtz. This time I get to disagree with the previous speaker. When we had this debate back in 2006, it was over what is primary versus secondary. And we did come up with the 49% means that you're secondary. You do not have the square footage. The square footage has to be secondary. And maybe today in 2019, a security residence is not a single bed with a little kitchen and whatever, but then that means you need to change the zoning ordinance, and it's not changed yet. And I don't think you can justify a single-family residence as a security unit. Those are not equivalent statements. Those are not equivalent definitions. And this is a mixed-use area in terms of our last commercial, and I know that the city, in my opinion, has been at fault in terms of not enforcing strictly that these security units need to be not all residential. And so it has evolved over time. But that doesn't mean you need to perpetuate that. You need to hold it to the zone that it is unless you're willing to change the zone. We need this kind of commercial area. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, please. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? Come forward. Okay. Okay, do we have any questions for the applicant? Before I close. Any questions? Okay, I have one. Or maybe a couple then. Please come forward. Okay. In looking at your plan, I didn't see any term, either articulation or any designation other than a line on the plan for what is your residential parking and what is your commercial space.
Understood. So we have the 2 residential spaces parked in tandem. On the top of the drawing here, there is one under cover in the garage, and behind it, the one under the garage doesn't have any delineation between it and the commercial space. The commercial spaces, commercial parking spaces are below the residential. Our intent is to provide an ADA, so there's one commercial and two commercial is the ADA.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other further questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. We'll close public comment at this point. Bring it back to the commission. Who wants to start on this one? Michael? Okay.
Yeah, I think this is very unfortunate. I love the design. I'm used to seeing urban conditions in things like London and Baltimore, where I began my practice, and this would be a classic Muse building with really beautiful articulation. I'm very concerned, though, that when you have a zone like a C2, I know we may not have fish cleaning or something happening here, but there's a lot of processes, I think, with entrepreneurial thinking and small businesses and small manufacturing that I think would be really beautiful to have a place like this to nest. But I don't get that's the sense that what this is. I think within the codes, I love testing the edges of the code. My fellow commissioner may think I go over the line on some of these, but things like the single entrance to a residence. That residence could just be on the third floor. It only needs a single access point. There are things in the code that talk about things like mezzanines that don't necessarily require the ADA access. It could be supplemental. If this was sold as a design, as a live-work kind of unit, where part of one of the floors was the office supporting the C2-ness of the lower floor, like hot rod or whatever it would be. I don't think anybody that's a resident in this zone has any right to complain about something that's a C2. Nobody should be next door saying, I don't like that use in this zone, because that's what this zone should be. So I am concerned that we're propagating a residential zone in a place that is a special kind of thing. So I didn't think it was sold to me the right way as to what this could be. I saw it as a very small commercial space. I'd be happy to count the parking commercial space. It's using the site and instead of the in lieu. But I do think that 50% kind of thing is a reasonable thing to want to have in a special zone that we have very limited distribution of in the city. And I do think it's in a unique situation that it could be supplemental to the things that are going to be happening slightly to the south. It could be supplemental to things traditionally like it was originally designed for, to be things that are farther west. So I do think it's reasonable to keep that zone set the way it is, and I think this pushes too far on the side of, again, it's like the last project. It's not developed dense enough within the nature of the zone. That was my complaint about taking R4 out of play for a while, but this is going to be permanently saying, no, those upper two levels are residential. It doesn't have the capacity to address them, so.
Jesse, you want to go? Yep.
Sure.
We'll see it out.
My thoughts are kind of with Michael's thoughts. I think there are other ways to do this. It seems pretty clear to me what the intended use will be. I mean, the residential would be a primary use as designed. I think it kind of speaks for itself. I think staff did an excellent job of analyzing this, and I agree with the way the staff report was written.
Joseph?
I think historically, it may turn out that it's too late to revitalize this area into a genuinely C2 commercial area. But I think it's too early to make that kind of an historical determination. And clearly, it was zoned to preserve this kind of commercial zoning. That's the primary, and that's the primary task that I think this body has. I think the size of the residential quarters severely weakens the notion that it is secondary to the primary use. I think that the fact that the commercial area is designed without any specific kind of commercial use also weakens the rationale for a security. And combined, I think they don't meet the test that would allow that exception in this area, and so on.
So the challenge I have here is, again, it is a beautiful building and would be a great addition to that neighborhood. One of the challenges I also see is we have gotten a reputation as a community of not being friendly to development at all, commercial or residential. It's tough. It's hard to get stuff through, and that's not entirely the city's fault. It's, part of our coastal commission background that we have to deal with. So it's hard to, you want to be able to say, look, we are friendly to development, we're friendly to commercial activity, we're friendly to residential activity. Certainly when I first read the staff report, that my impression was, gee, that's so small on the bottom where the commercial is, and it's a pretty big home on top. I do understand the applicant's suggestions that, a security unit today is different than the cot in the one bedroom. It's almost like in the downtown area where, in a way, having those apartments above commercial buildings gives a sense of security to the whole community, just that somebody's watching the street. So it's a little bit different interpretation of the word. I wonder also, given our reputation in the outside world for commercial development, do we have lots of people coming in wanting to use these spaces? Or is there a waiting list of people? I know there's a lot of vacant commercial properties right now, a lot of movement coming and going. Some of them may be getting filled, I don't know. I know of at least 2 businesses just in the last few days I found out are leaving the downtown. And one is a pretty good size location. So, there's a part of me that wants to say, let's push it forward and make sure we've got a really good, vibrant commercial business on the bottom floor. And I really wish, in a way, that there was one that it was planned for, so that in the plans you could say, we created this space, this way, this high, this wide, because we want it to be whatever. But if it doesn't fit, then it doesn't fit. So, I'm really conflicted here.
Okay, I'll take a shot at it here on that. This zone was intended as support for heavy industry, fishing industry, industrialized businesses based on the harbor. That's why this zone was set aside. And, that usage has changed. We don't have the purseaners coming in and offloading a 500-ton of fish, and then needing to have their winches repaired by a machine shop. But if we let these zones devolve into residential, which is always going to be the trend, that residential is always going to be able to pay more than industrial, then what we have is when the next boom or when the next phase of the harbor comes up, we won't have the space to support that. Such as, what I'm thinking is if, offshore wind. This would be a great, per se, you could put a business in here with a second floor support, first floor 3D printing to handle, gear repair for a pinion ring for offshore wind turbines, or support for wave machines, or support for something else, or aquaculture or agriculture or something. We have a very limited supply of C2, and none of the C2 should have been, in my opinion, should be converted to residential, which we have an oversupply of. Not an oversupply of, because more people want to live here, but we've got more residential than we do commercial, and especially industrial. So we need to protect the industrial, we need to protect the harbor frontage that has zones that are harbor dependent and ocean dependent. We need to keep those areas, for the industrial uses that they were zoned for to begin with. To me, this is clearly a residence. I would love to live there. It's a great design. It's a great location. You're gonna have, you'd have a great view from it, but it's not I don't feel it's appropriate for this zone. So, further?
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking on all that. So, if we're giving the applicant some direction on what we would approve, I don't know if it's, let me ask Nancy, is that 5149 thing written down anywhere?
Not in the current zone. If you go back to zone amendments, at one time it was 50%, and then it changed to primary and secondary. You're talking about the rear half and the second floor.
We had some other discussions on previous projects where we had on visitor serving, where there was commercial with security, and we limited the residential to no more than 1,000 square feet. And that seemed like an appropriate compromise, that you could get a good viable residential, dwelling in 1,000 square feet. So that was and that would keep the commercial to the primacy on that. So that was the discussion we had on other projects that, that have come before us before. But
So given the cost of land in this town, is there any difference in cost if it's zoned C2 or zoned R1? Or, I feel like, again, if you get less money out of your commercial industrial development, why would somebody buy that property and put something on it? How can you afford to develop it if you're not going to get a return on that investment?
typically market rates will apply, but C2 would be cheaper than an R4.
I would agree with that. I don't think you're off base there. You have a commercial piece of property here that has different valuations per square foot than residential does, and then you have multifamily residential, which has a different valuation as well. So, they all have their own unique values, not necessarily predicated on what's adjacent to them.
And Scott, the applicant was saying something about so there are some parking requirements that wouldn't require 4 parking spots. Is that true? So, like, hypothetically, if they modified part of the second floor to be commercial, would that trigger more parking spots, and would they be able to get out of that within lieu fees?
I think that if the residential was 1,000, as Chair Laura had mentioned, 1,000 square feet, then it would require 1 parking space, and that would leave the entire interior space to be commercial. And depending on the use of the commercial, so if you still wanted to do 3-story, you could have offices above for whatever heavier service commercial use was on the ground floor. And if it did require more parking, as the previous application did, they paid parking in lieu fees.
So there are options.
There are options, yeah.
I just want to restate that it's over 2,200 square feet is the lot area, and they are permitted to fill the lot area with buildings. So you potentially could have a 2,200 square foot unit on the 3rd floor. Right, there are reasons you'd pull back for decks and things like that, but even those things would be amenities for that unit up there. So I don't think it is small, but that's a large housing unit if you've got space down below devoted to the, whatever the work aspect is.
Okay, anybody wish to make a motion on this?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's see. So I propose that we, with respect to conditional use permit, CUP 18-06, coastal development permit, CDP 18-008, and parking exception, PKG 18-01, that we deny the project.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay,
I did want to ask one question,
Okay.
if I could. You supported the parking exception. It was primarily the denial based on the use dominance. the
Yes,
way it was
that's
shown.
correct.
Is that our feeling as well? Would we have supported the parking exception? I know I can say I would have tended to think I would have.
Yeah, I would support, a lenient leniency on the parking to get the proper usage and to get the proper industrial usage.
So
on the property.
that's great information. I think it might be worthwhile having a little more discussion before we call the decision. And maybe that's a little along the lines of, do we want to, as Commissioner Barone suggested, give the opportunity for the applicant to redesign the project if the commission's willing to provide some direction as to what might be a little more acceptable? And then we might want to ask the applicants, after that direction is provided, if you want to go down that road, if they're agreeable to that, or whether they'd rather have the commission simply deny the project, and then they could take it to council, and have them make a decision. So I think there's a couple of options here that might be worth pursuing before we call the decision.
Okay, I think that's great. We usually give that option to the applicant, and I bypass that, so I appreciate that, Scott.
Sure.
Okay, so Joseph, what direction would you give to the applicant?
Well, certainly I would like to see a significant reduction. I would like to see a reduction in the ratio of residential to commercial space. And I'm not even comfortable with it being at 51-49%. I don't think I think you need to examine it closely to decide when the residential is really secondary to the commercial development on the property. I would really like to do anything possible to encourage that property as being developed as a commercial property. But I lack the expertise to say in detail what that would be, given the constraints. But I clearly want to go on the record for saying I want to commend you and encourage you to develop that property. It's just that the current complexion to me doesn't seem to be primarily a commercial development. And as I said before, it's not for this commission to decide that the only good use for that property is to in fact make it primarily residential, because the purpose of this board is to enforce the zoning code to our best understanding. And certainly my best understanding right now is that property should remain C2, and that any residential component should be clearly secondary.
Jesse?
I'll go so far as to say I think a 5149 minimum with the maximum square footage of 1,000 square feet, that sounds appropriate. The other thing that occurred to me is that it's a beautiful design, and I don't want to impugn anybody's artistic flair here, but when you walk up, it should look like a commercial building. There should be a place for a sign. There should be, you should walk up and know you're walking up to a commercial building. And I don't know if our commercial development standards would apply to this project.
We haven't done them yet.
I thought we had something pinned up ours. I don't know. Do we have any kind of guidance we could give them as far as commercial?
I think that's fair. From the staff standpoint, when we looked at this, This is tough because of what's happened over there, and I feel for the applicant. I mean, I don't like walking into situations like this. It's never a good situation when we have to bring something forward that we can't work out before it gets here. That being said, there's nothing on that project that you saw when you looked at the front elevation that said it was commercial.
Yep.
Nothing. It didn't look that way. So the issue that you're raising is similar to the issue that staff had when we looked at it. We're like, okay, like this is commercial property and should look commercial, right? And then, we want to have a residential unit to be a security unit consistent with the code. Okay, so it should be designed commercial, security unit. This was designed residential, and some space for commercial, arguably. And so that was why we brought it forward to you, because we didn't think that was really the intent there. So asking to have it look the frontage look a little more commercial is probably appropriate. I mean, there is things they could do to the existing elevation probably to make it look commercial. That's not the way they brought it forward, I guess. It wouldn't take a whole lot of changes to do that.
Joseph, go ahead.
And again, I've made this argument before, noting that the commercial guidelines are still a proposal, but nevertheless, we make decisions about the appropriateness of commercial designs based on community norms and what we deem to be neighborhood compatibility. And those thoughts, more likely than not, are summarized in what will be the commercial guidelines, but we are certainly free to exercise our notions as to what are suitable commercial guidelines even before those proposals are adopted. So we would be free to suggest or require some things.
Okay. Michael, you ready?
I just want to say, I think the elevations are fantastic. I don't think it looks uncommercial. I think it looks like the dominant use is the upper two floors based on the way it's done. I think the dominant use should look like it's the lower level, that wherever the residential is clearly secondary. So it's a matter of that. Can you go back to the elevation? Because I don't want the architecture to change much at all. It's the walkway that makes the first floor very much a first floor. If that was on the upper level, and you had a two-story kind of coverage for some of the parking, if that's what it is down there. The other thing I wanted to ask too, Nancy, if the mention was, for example, the hot rod aspect. If they are repairing vehicles, does a vehicle that drives in to be repaired count as a parking space?
I don't know, I don't think so. I think you'd calculate the number of parking spaces required on the use.
Okay.
If the use is auto repair, that's not a parking space.
Yeah. Okay.
And they did design it looks like 2 single-car roll-up garage doors, so it was designed to have vehicular access to the commercial space.
Yeah. No, I like the roll-up doors. I think that actually makes it seem more commercially-y. But yes, that's the main thing I want to say is to me the two-story space of the residence is clearly dominating the facade. That's the problem.
Okay. Susan?
Yeah, I'd like to see if we can find a way to make it work. I did notice it's a 10-foot ceiling on the first floor, and then you have 8-foot to 13-foot on the second floor because there's open areas. So I wonder if somehow raising the ceiling height on the bottom floor makes more sense for heavier industrial uses. And maybe having a floor and a half instead of 2 floors of residential somehow, just with that extra ceiling height. And again, I don't know what kinds of industrial businesses are going to go in and what they need.
They actually have a floor and a half, so I think on the left side, that's the taller, on the second floor, and what looks like the third floor, that's the taller space, that's the living area, and then the other side is the bedroom above, I can't remember what's below, but so they really did that to fit within the 30-foot height limitation, because if you increase I think a lot of commercial businesses are 12 and 14-foot ceilings. If you did that, you really
could only get
stories.
one more story, yeah.
Okay.
And so I was again told that if they did offices on that second floor, they would have to have the ADA elevator big enough for a gurney. Are there any, ways to get around that?
There's different requirements. We didn't look at a proposal for office on the second floor. They proposed office on the third floor.
Okay.
And that was a little more challenging.
Yeah.
But that's really building would work on the requirements for the ADA access.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as, I guess I kind of gave my inclinations is it needs to be primary industrial commercial. And then, that's what I base my decision on here. We need to support the limited amount of industrial locations that we have in the city. There's a burgeoning, hot rod, auto restoration, business and community right in that area that I think is a good business draw for this town. We have the car shows, and that's all in support of that. So this should readily support that or support a harbor industrial use. And
If we can maybe offer a third, maybe a third industry that could be thriving in that area would be, maybe we have a lot of tourism, maybe a craft beer brewery, craft distillery type of situation, just, kind of throwing other options out that maybe they hadn't thought about.
yeah. But clearly it's not a residential district. So as far, that's where I am. Okay, so I'd like to open the floor again for the applicant. Come forward. Okay, we have options. Clearly, we can deny the project, which I think was where the commission was heading. We can continue the project and have you resubmit. If we deny the project, then you can appeal to the city council.
Yeah.
If we continue the project, you can submit, change the project and resubmit. So do you have any indication on what you'd like to see happen?
Yeah, I think we want to continue, certainly. I think that just now we've come up with options that would meet both the owner's needs and provide you with provide you what you're looking for.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think that we'll
That's
take another
exciting.
chance at it and hopefully can come back. I think upon return, though, if it is still denied, I think one point I wanted to make was that we wanted to make sure that it got denied without prejudice. Is that
No, what we'll do is we'll
make
continue
somewhere?
the project at date uncertain.
Sure.
So there will be no vestiges of ill will
Previous
attached.
review?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So we'll review the project, the amended project on its own footing
Okay.
when it comes back.
All right. Thank
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so I think we,
Need to withdraw our motion and second and start over.
yeah, so we need to withdraw the motion,
I move that I withdraw my previous motion.
withdraw the second.
I will throw a second.
Okay, so would you like to make a new motion?
I'll move that we continue the project to a date uncertain, to allow the applicant to reapply through, and using the direction the commission's given tonight.
Okay, great.
I'll second that, too.
Okay, great. Any discussion on this motion? Okay.
Let me just say one
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
I love the design.
Yeah.
We really need good design, and this was a great design. There's nothing wrong with the way this building looks, I don't think. I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, and I'll concur on that. I think, I've got to commend you for the effort you put into it, and I think it would be a great addition to the city in a different location. So let's just, if you can change the usage, I think we'll be fine.
It occurred to me, and I don't know off the top of my head if this is even possible, but I mean, it seems like with the ADA requirements, if you had a mixed-use building where you had an F1 and a B on the second floor and then an R3 on, floors 2 and 3, or, half of, it seems like a ADA could be met with a B on the second floor and an F or something else on the first floor without an elevator. That occurred to me. I don't know that that's factual, but I mean, it seems like I've seen those kind of projects before, so maybe, look into something
I
like that.
think we get into the condition of a mezzanine, an office mezzanine, if the usage is compatible on the first floor as the second floor, so there's accommodation. I think ADA can be met that way.
Right, I think it has to do with reasonable accommodations, and if we have the same sort of equitable facilitation on the first floor that we would on the second floor. Anyway, just maybe if that's helpful, so.
Okay, Joseph, did you want?
Well, I'm remembering that in the proposed zoning, there are some thoughts about raising some of the building heights in some of the areas to better accommodate commercial on the first floor and affordable housing on the second or third floor. And probably that movement is designed to accommodate and be a solution to just these kinds of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And this property, as it is sort of situated away from the prime or historical commercial area of Morro Bay, might be a suitable test case or something like that. Just something to keep in mind.
Okay, would you call the question then, please?
Commissioner Lucas?
Aye.
Commissioner Stewart?
Aye.
Commissioner Barone?
Aye.
Commissioner Ingraffia?
Aye.
Chair Lohr?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next item, does anybody need to take a break, or you want to move to the next item? Ready to move? Okay. So this is item number B3, case number CUP 18-07, CDP 18-010, and PKG 18-03. And site location is 982 Carmel, Morro Bay Boulevard, Morro Bay, California, I'm sorry. Nancy, are you?
Just get the change.
Okay. Does anybody have any ex parte communication?
Kind of. I drove up earlier and I was looking at the property and I saw the applicant and I inadvertently had ex parte communication, so just in case.
Okay.
All right, here we go. This is an application that includes the addition of an accessory dwelling unit onto an existing primary residence. It also involves a change in the paved parking area at the front of the house, and it is an after-the-fact planning permit for 2 additions that were not permitted. The home was built in 1954 with a single-car carport. The site is 5,200 square feet and the zoning is R1. The proposal is a new 409 square foot accessory dwelling unit in the backyard, a new deck at the second floor level at the front of the home, changes in the door and the window locations at the front of the home, and they would like to get permitted for the additional room added to the house and the bathroom shed in the backyard that will become part of the new ADU. They are also going to restore landscaping in the front yard adjacent to the driveway area. The site history is between 2007 and 2009, the entire front yard was paved. So the top right picture shows 2007, where you can see a more traditional driveway and 60% or more landscaping, and the other picture shows the entire yard paved. The non-permitted addition, this photo shows a tall green shed in the backyard that has been converted into a bathroom. And a portion of the carport was a little L-shaped, and a portion of the carport was converted into 137 square feet of interior space. Property development standards. The R1 standards, the existing home meets all of those other than the side setback on the west, which is 3 feet. The proposed project, all of the things they're proposing, the ADU and the deck in the front, are within the development standards, so they're not worsening any non-conforming condition. Morro Bay residential design guidelines. The front of the home has been enhanced by relocation of the front door. The front door currently, it faces the carport, so it can't even be seen from the street. And the addition of the deck off the master bedroom. And so this shows on the left the existing, and on the right the proposed. And you can see on the right the proposed, they're eliminating the asphalt and putting in, it's minimal landscaping, but landscaping. This is the ADU. It's not visible from the street, but it provides architectural interest and uses materials consistent with the rest of the home. This also has a parking exception. The original home included a single-car carport, and at some point, the house that was originally 280 square feet was increased to 1,063 square feet, which would have required 2 covered and enclosed parking spaces. The applicant is requesting the parking exception to allow a new open parking space next to the existing carport space to meet off-street parking requirements. And in this photo, the parking space would be where the white car is. The parking exception can be granted by Planning Commission upon the following findings. The exception will not constitute a grant of special privilege inconsistent with the driveway or parking limitations on other properties in the vicinity. The single-car carport was legal non-conforming, condition that predates the incorporation of the city. The site has adequate space for an open parking space to meet the two parking space requirement. And the parking situation is very similar to homes in the neighborhood. The exception will not adversely affect the health, safety, or general welfare of persons working or residing in the vicinity, and no traffic problems will result from the proposed modification. And again, with the condition to restore the majority of the site back to landscaped area, the parking modification will meet this requirement. And finally, the exception is reasonably necessary for the applicant's full enjoyment of uses similar to those upon adjoining real property. And this is an odd-shaped site, and approval of the parking exception is reasonable and not dissimilar to the majority of homes in the immediate area that are the same vintage as the subject property. Staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the requested conditional use permit, coastal development permit, and parking exception by adopting Resolution 12-19.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? Jesse?
Would the unpermitted additions require Planning Commission approval, or would they have been just at staff level approved?
Without the parking exception, I think they would have been a staff level approval.
So the parking exception is required for the additions because of the non-conforming status of the single carport.
Yes.
So either way, this would have had to come to us. I mean, if they weren't doing the
Yes.
ADU, even the unpermitted work would have still required a trip to the Planning Commission. Okay.
Joseph?
I have two concerns, but the primary one is the incorporation of the unpermitted bathroom into the permitted structure. So what's the nature of the examination that determines that it's a safe structure,
I
like
think
2x4s, plumbing, et cetera?
generally, the fire department and the building inspector will walk through a property and see what it looks like. And that could lead to approval, depending on also records that are kept based for the construction, or it could lead to something more invasive, opening up the walls, looking at it, or it could be disallowed. But in this case, they're trying to incorporate it so that they don't lose the value from that into the new accessory dwelling unit.
So it's left up to the discretion of the person who's doing the examination?
They'll be
Code
submitting,
requirements.
building permits for all of it
Right.
to us. So it'll be reviewed for all components related to building code compliance, to current building code standards, 2016 code.
Right, and so if you're uncertain, someone is going to have to look at it and make some conclusion that either they remove parts of the drywall or they have enough evidence to conclude it was done properly.
That's exactly what we will do.
Yeah.
Susan? Michael?
I just want to be really clear. So they're not demolishing the bathroom, but they are demolishing the upper part of the bathroom. You said it was like in the one image you had, it looked like it was a taller shed structure.
They're assuming that it gets approved when it goes through building
Yeah,
permit.
yeah.
They're not demolishing any part of the bathroom. They're just building an ADU around it.
No, I think they're taking that whole top shed down 6 feet or so.
No, it's
My guess.
11
No?
foot, and the ADU is 11 feet.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Nancy, can you fill me in on the chronology of this? When was, who was responsible for the unpermitted work? When was the project sold? When did it become, when did it come to the city that there was illegal work done on this property, and how did we get to this point?
Okay, so the sheds have been there for 15 years or more, and I could get that from aerial photography going back in time. I can't tell what's in the sheds. Neighbors say that it used to be like a potting shed with a sink in it, but at some point it became a bathroom. I don't know who did that improvement. The same is true for the enclosure of the portion of the carport into another room. We don't have the time frame on that. The aerial photographs, apparently it's cloudy or foggy in Morro Bay a lot, and so we can't see that well. The current owners, I believe, and they're here and they can speak to this, but they purchased this, I believe, a year ago, maybe last May. So the sheds were there, the full paved frontage was there. And maybe the additional room was there, I don't really know. The code enforcement, I think, started in 2018, and it really related to an RV that was parked in the front that was plugged in and being used as a dwelling unit. And I think from that, more was discovered.
Okay. Any further questions, or, okay. At this point, I'll open it up to the applicant. We'll open up to public comment, and would the applicant please come forward? You have the ability.
Hi, my name is Misa. I'm one of the owners.
Could you pull the mic up close to you?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
My name is Misa. I'm one of the owners with my friend Hadi. He purchased the property in April 18, and I got involved in September 18. I'm also a licensed contractor. He's currently living with me because this house is not livable, and we left it to figure out what to do. But yeah, he purchased it, and when I got involved in April or in September, we met with, prior to Nancy, there was Joan. We met with Joan in October, and we met with Scott also in October, and then we were given the okay to, we got 2 permits, one building permit on we were doing remodel inside the house, which was basically flooring, cabinets, appliances. We wanted to do doors and windows. All the windows are new, and we changed the doors, and just cosmetic work and whatever that was in the building plan that we submitted. So that work got done. We finished that in December, and now we're submitted to complete it so we can use it, and this is where we're at, basically.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I'm here just, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Okay, we'll hear from other members if anybody wishes to speak, and we'll call you back up.
Sure, sounds good.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to speak to this item?
Betty Winholtz. About 15 years ago, there was a home up on Bernardo that someone bought, changed the garage into a bedroom, and then turned around to sell it. And it was not allowed to be sold until the carport or the garage was changed back into a bedroom. So I'm not sure how this situation got sold, if that's actually a city rule or not, that they inspect and they know whether a garage has been converted or not. So my thing is not about the EDU or what they want to do with it. My concern is when people violate and do breaking of the rules without getting their permits, like they did with Panorama, at what point do we fine them? And I think it's real important that people be fined, whether it's $100 or $1,000. I think those things need to happen so the word gets out that you don't break the rules. And so I don't know if these people are responsible or the previous owners, but it seems like we need some kind of consistency about this kind of item. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak to this item? Come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm humbled to be here. You know, the reviews that you folks go through, the details, the layers of data, the condition, I'll stop there. I want to reach out to Director Pruitt and Nancy Hubbard because they've been so accessible and great information sources. I'm here to express the collective comments, concerns that 6 neighbors have, none of which, or maybe a few, ended up actually showing up tonight, but they gave me permission to speak on their behalf because we're pretty much all in agreement. This all boils down to 3 separate areas of concern. And if I may respectfully request a little extension of a 3-minute time limit, because I'll try to be brief, I promise. But basically, the 3 areas of concern are parking details on the front yard, height and design of the proposed ADU in the rear yard, and the west side setback encroachment. It was highlighted in red. You may have seen that in the report. All agree, and in the front yard setting where 75 feet of frontage has been divided into 45 and 35-foot segments, the 45 westerly side, being landscaped, seems to have the conditions expressly prohibit parking in that area. That's why it'll be presumably covered in gravel with plantings inside to keep it the soft scape that it's designed to be. Neighbors are asking for consideration of your input and or conditions that would possibly put up small walls, raised beds, something that would potentially block future abuse of that parking. You know that it's anything to discourage or block persons from attempting to park where they shouldn't be. I think that's good forward thinking. I hate to say it, but people do cheat when there's little or no consequences, and we live in a neighborhood that's flooded with vehicles, RVs, boats, etc. It's the same story in many places in town. So we're hoping you'll consider a condition that would say, yeah, we like the fact that the 35 remaining feet on the east side will be dedicated parking. We also would like to see some features, maybe some hardscape features in that other parking prohibited area. now is the time. I mean, parking enforcement in the future is not likely to happen. It's pretty soft under today's rules and so forth, so. Long-term neighbors I've talked to, I've only been around for a decade, but people that have been there 20, 30 years have considered this home, always considered it an eyesore. And so we want to thank the owners for actually doing some cosmetic improvement. To landscape what is just wall-to-wall asphalt and break that up and soften that look is very appealing. The balcony deck design on it, I think it kind of breaks up the stark or blunt sort of nature to the front elevation. The new doors and windows, they're going to have lots of cosmetic appeal compared to what we've seen in the past. Secondly, second item is we ask that the heights of existing shed and proposed ADU be lowered. The visual impact that this brings to adjacent properties and people that live uphill that would look down on this is a big concern. When I look at the design and you see the elevation views, the ADU begins to attach to that shed, if we want to call it a shed, comes to the rear property and turns towards the east side. Whoever drew this up is intending that the roof line all plane out with a very tall shed. Speaking from a lot of building experience, myself and others who've looked at this that have building background have said, you know, this would be really easy to just take this down to a slab on grade type of construction. It's proposed as a raised floor, and part of that proposal is to get this thing up in the air so that it planes out with that shed that had the unpermitted work in it. You could easily lower that shed and come up with a design that just plain takes this, it's very attainable to take it down 2 feet. It's a simple matter, and we would ask for conditions that would promote that. My other neighbor said something like, you know, the design of this is really patchwork. It doesn't architecturally connect well. Sure, they're going to put stucco on the ADU and so forth to match the stucco of the building, but when you look at that rear elevation, it's already a patchwork of segments of shed roofs due to multiple additions done on that back wall. And the way that they propose to connect that shed to the building, which creates another Cricket California framing connector, brings in an angle like this, and then the shed's on an angle like this, and the way the ADU leaves that, it's still angled again. And so I think Nancy used the comment in her brief, it's an interesting architecture. Well, actually it's ugly. It's hard to look at when I think about the finished product. So I think it could be cleaned up by pushing it down and maybe looking at some of those design flaws that I've referred to. Lastly, the encroachment issue that I bring up, the third aspect of concern is west side setback. The city ordered a site survey. Apparently a licensed surveyor came out and from that produced a drawing that shows a 3-foot setback on that west wall, which by today's standards would be considered encroachment. Or I know that the city would not allow anything to be built, residentially built, within 5 feet of a property line. So there is a public safety concern there. I'm not sure how to address that. Perhaps fire rating of the wall. I mean, if it was in the commercial setting, going back to your question, Joseph, was, you know, zero lot line, what do you do? Well, you put up 2 4-hour rated walls. You get 2 masonry walls that have no openings allowed. So as you bring a wall closer to adjacent property, in the commercial world, you sit there and you increase fire rating. It's clearly charted in the California Building Code. Closing comments. I guess I did miss one key point. The current setback is actually under 3 feet. I live next door, I know exactly what the setback is. That I think it was called 80-foot shed, now bathroom in the backyard, was an uninhabitable garden shack. At one time it had a sink in it, unfinished interior, one entry, a crude window on it, and the current owners did create great improvement to it. It's obviously a nice bathroom now. But I'm asking for some influence from this commission that would say, let's consider lowering it and/or relocating it in a way that is consistent with a nice, smooth attachment profile.
Okay. Could you please conclude?
I will. Thank you for your patience.
Okay.
I really appreciate it. Obviously, the existing non-conforming does not apply to that shed today. It needs to be up to today's standards. And whereas this project would ordinarily have fire sprinklers, for example, using the 50% rule, had this been a normal addition to in a typical situation, non-ADU, fire sprinklers in the front and back, but the applicant will enjoy the cost savings of the leniency of no fire sprinklers per the state law. If the main house is not sprinklered, therefore the local entity can't require the ADU. So that's in their favor.
Okay, thank you very much.
May I give you 2 more sentences?
Okay.
What neighbors are asking for, we deem reasonable. Please consider continuation of this matter as opposed to approval this evening. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions for me?
No.
Can you state your name?
Yeah.
Sorry, Tim Wilcox.
Okay.
Yeah, you have one question for can we determine whether or not if
I'm sorry, this is not a conversation.
Okay.
So thank you for your input, though. Okay, next.
My name's Ken Beck. I'm the owner. If you look at the property to the left bottom corner there, that's my property. I'm a rear neighbor. We've lived in Morro Bay now for probably 15 months. This gentleman bought the property behind us, the subject property. We basically watched him turn what was a shed into a bathroom. We watched him do some other remodeling with raised decks and tented structures in the backyard. We've watched him create a pile of debris in the carport that's still there today. I've watched him burn building debris in a stone, circular thing in the backyard. I'm not looking forward to this construction going on. I'm sure no one has checked the foundation of that shed that he's proposing to work around, nor were they added on to the carport to enclose that 130 square feet or whatever. So it's pretty scary. As far as the back portion of it, as Tim was saying, architecturally, it's going to look horrible. I'm a prior contractor. I'm retired now. I have an opinion. That's all I got. But I live there. I have a economic investment, monetary investment in this community. And I'm hoping to see something that's going to be an improvement to the whole thing, not just the front. I think the front's going to look great. The back, with what's going on now and what he's proposing with that angular kind of setting, and taken from there, it's sad. So I would hope for your hope watching you guys, hearing you guys with the project before this, make recommendations on how to architecturally improve or somehow come up with a solution. We're not against an ADU. We're just against horrible outcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Would anybody else like to speak to this item?
Hi, my name is Janet Beck, and I am Ken's wife. I own the property also behind this proposed project. We've been there about 15 months, so that's 16 months. And we have just watched some of this go on, over our fence and in the backyard. I think that the elevation issue is a big issue for us from the standpoint, let's compare it to the previous project that you considered that everybody oohed and awed over how beautiful that was, that don't change the building, it's so nice, let's see what else we can do. And I'm a certified master kitchen and bath designer. I've done projects, commercial and residential, and additions to homes that I've designed that can flow with the existing home. And I think they have the opportunity to do that there as well, instead of just patching on something that's already there, which already is not visually pleasing. So that's all I hope for, is that they do something nice for the neighborhood, do something right, that they do it all to code, and it'll just better the neighborhood if they do the right thing. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Commissioners. I'm Laurel Barton. I live directly across the street from this house at 983 Carmel. And my concern, most of them have been addressed, but the one that I feel very strongly about is this house is very stark and very tall. And so if we're going to create an area for landscaping, I would like there to be some kind of consideration for some varying heights of landscaping, not just flat to the ground. It needs softening. This is a big blocky house, and it really needs something else, not just the flattest plants. So, and one of the things I was thinking of is perhaps to do a raised bed, for instance, so that would get the plants up in the first place and then fill out and help soften the whole front of the house. So that's it.
All right, well, thank you for your comments. I think that's all we've had out there, so any questions for the applicant?
Yes.
Okay, would you please come step forward again?
I'll just be to the point. There's a rather astounding allegation that the owner built this unpermitted bathroom. Could you respond to that?
The shed, or whatever you want to call it, that's been there. We didn't touch it. Inside of it, it still doesn't have a sink. We purchased a prefab shower. It's like a unit, like a washer unit, and we just put it inside of it. So we didn't do any kind of construction inside. We put a shower in there, but there is still no sink, and we haven't touched it. It's just, there's walls, and there's a shower unit, and there's a laundry unit, and there's nothing else.
Is there a commode?
There's also a toilet.
Right.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And underneath it, there is plumbing. It's a raised deck. I haven't opened it to see what's underneath it, but there's plumbing, all kinds of stuff that's underneath that shed. So if we tear it down, we're going to have to tear the whole thing down. And right now, my friend purchased this unit with 3.5% down with an FHA loan, and we put in a lot of money in it, just bringing it up to par. This house, as everybody's saying, it was beat up. There was nothing in there. Everything was damaged, and it's a unit that you can actually look at now. And we're trying to wrap this up and not lose a whole lot. We're on credit cards, and we're doing everything that we can. We've submitted plans, everything's being looked at. When the inspector came out to look at the the portion that we completed, and Chad, the inspector, came out and he looked at everything else. I basically told him, whatever you find, you can open up whatever you want to open. Whatever you find, we'll correct it. We basically inherited something, got into something, and we're trying to make a use of it. And we've had it since April of 2018, and we haven't been able to live in it. So we're just making a $4,000 a month payment for nothing, and we want to make it livable. So as far as, I made notes of what the neighbors have talked about. The 3-foot setback, I can't do anything about it. The building's there. I can't tear the whole thing down. Height of ADU, and something that my partner added before I was involved was the deck. There is a deck that attaches to the restroom, and that deck was added in. And from my conversations with him, from what I understand is that he talked to the inspector, and because it's below a certain height, I don't know if it's 12, 14 inches or what, that it didn't need permit. So he put that in. And during that process, there were photos taken of our home that the code enforcer that came in, basically said neighbors can't do that, to just take photos and, and submit it, or which was basically he was putting those in, and apparently there was no permit required for it. So that's where it is right now. There's a deck that attaches to that restroom. The parking, we were told that we need to take it back to, there's a lot of payment that we need to do something about it, so we can't just park anywhere, which we said, okay, we submitted plans, and we're going to turn it into a hardscape. The whole thing will have a few inches of gravel, and there's going to be low water usage plants that are going to be planted there all over, so we can't just drive over those. And we're okay putting a couple trees in there if needed. As far as constructing a wall, I preferably don't really want to do that. We don't have the money for it, and I don't know why it would be required. We're going to add the landscaping everywhere, basically on the left side of the house from where the entrance is. Fire sprinklers, I don't know what to say about that. I'll basically talk to the building department and see if we need to do that or not. And as far as building material burning, we've burnt wood and it's like a fire pit that we basically put rocks around. We don't have it's not livable, as I said. So when we were coming here for city purposes, we would sit in the back and burn wood as we're sitting and get warm and have some food and relax. We didn't have a place to go inside the home to sleep or anywhere. So there was an RV that there were complaints about it. We've sold it. It was my partner's. We didn't have any place to park it. We've sold it, and it's been out of there for months now. And what else was?
So the height of the new structures and the height of the shed that you turned into a bathroom, would you be willing to reduce the overall height of that?
I think it would be easier for us maybe to cut the top rather than to demo everything down.
Yeah,
so I'm okay if we have to, if it's a must, I'll make it happen.
Okay, yeah, please come forward for right now, and then we'll.
The height, if I may add, the height of that deck is not.
No, we're not talking about the height of the
bathroom,
deck.
I'm saying, sorry. It doesn't block anybody's view because their property is the lower.
What is the height of that? I didn't see any elevation marks.
I have no idea, but that it
Measured
blocks
11 feet.
anything.
Measured 11 feet?
I mean, it's not even
From the plans.
visible from the front of the house, and it's not blocking anybody's view as far as it's a flat.
Okay, so let me just ask a question. So the height of the existing shed that you converted into a bathroom is 11 feet. What is the height of the proposed ADU that the new construction you're going to put in?
Hold on, let me take a look at that real quick.
I didn't see a ridge elevation on that? Was it there?
That's the shed, that's the house.
Right, but I didn't see an elevation.
Right, but it's consistent, that's 11, that's 11.
Okay.
That would be my assumption. If the shed is 11, it looks like the proposed ADU would be adding on that existing ridge line or roof line, however, I can't see how the roof's laid out. It looks like a shed roof, actually, but.
Yeah, it's the same
Okay.
thing, yeah.
And then also the ADU that is proposed is slab on grade, from what I saw on the plans?
It's the same as the bathroom, so it's all, it's like, it's raised 12 inches.
Well, the plans call it out as slab on grade.
No, let's see. There's a foundation plan, and basically this is what it looks like.
On your section?
It's a S1 section.
Oh, that's an existing concrete slab?
Oh, where, there's a...
Okay, section B and section C on S 3.1. That looks to me like slab on grade.
It's 3.1. I don't have the latest plans, but
Okay.
that's probably, you're talking about where the bathroom is, and there is nothing between the bathroom and the existing home. And that's being connected. There is going to be a laundry room for the main house, so
Okay.
to call. So that's slab on grade because that's connected to the other portion. You can access it from the main residence, the existing residence. And then there is no access from that area to the bathroom. The wall ends there. And then you can access the bathroom from the ADU from the other side. So it's slab on grade to the part where the bathroom starts.
Okay, great. Any other specific questions? Michael, Susan? Okay, thank you very much. We'll close public comment at this point.
Yes. Staff a question?
Yeah.
Nancy, the applicant alluded to the fact that there was an existing issued permit for the residents, but you talked about a code enforcement case dating back to September. So are they actively able to work on this property?
I think they were referring to an interior remodel permit, so it didn't have anything to do with any of the subject code enforcement items.
I see.
So when they did the windows and the doors and the interior remodel, did they pull a permit for that?
I believe they did,
Okay, prior to the work or after the code enforcement?
prior to the work.
Okay.
Well, there might have been a code enforcement unrelated to that. At the same time.
They've done some work, and we had them come in and get a permit for continuing
Okay.
to move forward.
And so did they add the plumbing and the bathroom fixtures prior to pulling the permit or after the pull?
They had no permit for turning that shed into a bathroom.
Okay.
And they still don't.
And they still don't?
But we don't know if they did that work prior to the code enforcement case being initiated.
Don't know.
Okay, at this point, it doesn't matter, they didn't have a permit for it. Okay, this is my pet peeve, and indulge me here, and this is one of the reasons I want to create a situation where we have penalties, monetary penalties for not pulling permits. We see this time and time again. And we get caught in the middle between the neighbors and and the owners and the applicants, where with viable issues of, whatever the circumstances, if you don't have a permit, you shouldn't do the work. Plain and simple. So, okay, I'll state that to begin with.
We can double the building permit fees. That's the fee that we can charge when they come in.
Right.
The other portions of the municipal code say you identify things that are inconsistent with the code. You notify the owners and give them the opportunity before you fine them to correct it. Well, the corrective action in this instance is to come in and get the proper permits, which is why we're sitting here. And that's the way the code's written.
Okay, but we have an opportunity to adjust that code. There are several municipalities that if work is performed without a permit, that the owners and the contractors can be fined. So if that's what I'm saying going forward, I'd like to see if we can initiate that with the new general plan update, if we've got consensus. Because we keep seeing this time and time again, we try to slap somebody on the wrist and we don't really have any mechanism to do that.
That is the problem.
That is a problem. So, and until somebody gets slapped really hard, it's not going to stop. No, you can't. You had your opportunity. We've closed public comment. So, okay, let's open a discussion on this. So who would like to go next?
All right, well, there's a lot of things to say here. First of all, I'd like to commend you guys for deciding to build an accessory dwelling unit because affordable housing is in short supply here. And I'm not terribly concerned about the parking amendment because I think the day when cars and automobiles had to be inside garages is long past in Morro Bay. But I'm focusing on the permit violation and the bathroom. And, you know, I was originally prepared to be convinced that when you guys purchased the property, it would be pretty easy to detect that the bathroom was built without permit just by virtue of title search and tax rolls and the like. But now, as we now know, you decided to build the bathroom in that structure without a permit. And then to take advantage of a particularly useful but lenient state law about accessory dwelling units to sort of take advantage of that leniency. But now irrevocably tied to that project is the fact that you initially engaged in some illegal activity by turning that shed into a bathroom. So what to do about that? But even more importantly to me, aside from the safety aspects of how that, what I'll call now bathroom is constructed, is, again, as what's been alluded to here, is the incentive to do things legally and apply permits beforehand and not retroactively and ask forgiveness. And I'm thinking that the examination by a city inspector of that structure to determine whether it's safe, and by that I mean built to codes, is one that also in part, let's face it, it depends on honesty and credibility. Now, that's not to say that you have been dishonest in that you readily admitted that you did the work, but the credibility is taxed. And so I would be pretty adamant that whatever inspection takes place in that shed bathroom has to be very robust and atypical, so that, one, we know that things are done safely, and I mean foundation, adequate 2x4s, electrical conduit, plumbing, the whole thing, so that we know it's done safely, and so that we send a very clear message that if you choose to do things illegally and then ask for forgiveness later, that there's a real financial penalty associated with that. And to Chairman Lohr's comment about adding to the penalties for these permit violations, I would even go further than that, and I would say, not that this is one of those cases, but in egregious cases, we should consider that the applicant actually be stopped from applying for a permit for a period of time, be it a year or 2 years or even 3 years, depending on how egregious the offense is. With respect to the comments about doing some additional planning, that strikes me as falling within our discretion, reasonable discretions in getting the in seeking the permit for the parking exception. So I think we should do something not terribly expensive, but effective, as in planting some trees or something like that. Those are my comments.
Jesse?
What's occurred to me through this whole thing is that, and I could be wrong on this, but my gut feeling is that this isn't this is an entrepreneurial venture, and that this house is intended to be added onto and flipped. I don't know that for a fact. That's just how this construction type strikes me. And not that that really should have a bearing on the decision here. However, that's just my comment. I agree with the neighbors to the rear in that the hodgepodge nature of the addition, of the shed, and how it's positioned relative to the existing residence, and then the proposed addition of the laundry to somehow make this continuous, just seems out of whack. It doesn't seem to work. I mean, I get that the lot's oddly shaped, but it just seems like we're perpetuating an existing problem by allowing a very obviously subpar design to continue. What else was I going to say here? So another thing that strikes me, obviously, I'm in plan review, and professionally, that's what I do for a living. And as I'm looking at this plan, and I'm looking at the site, the first thing that strikes me is that we're not going to be able to find this in an emergency. You can't see it from the street. There was no readily available indication of that there is a unit in the back A and how to get there B. So I just think the entire design needs another look. I'm not opposed to approving an accessory dwelling unit on this site. I think what I'll be opposed to is perpetuating the existing problem. And I would encourage the applicant to go back to the drawing board and look at a redesign that number one is more aesthetically appealing, and number two has a safety, more of a safety factor in mind, so that we can see it from the street, and if someone's having a heart attack, we can go in there and find you and perform CPR or whatever we have to do. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Michael?
I have a tendency to pull up Google Earth when we look at these things, and the setback is odd, but if you look at the neighborhood, there's corners of buildings bouncing off fences at a relatively small increment, and with the nature of the curvatures of the street, there's a lot of angles involved in relationships between things. When you look at the thing on its own, it does seem a little crazy, but the initial shed that was put out there looks like it's in relationship to the I'm going to turn it around so I've got north up here. It looks like the initial shed was a reaction to the east property line. The long end of the leg being developed is a reaction to the south property line, and the connector is sort of just trying to resolve those two things. So it's not without some kind of logic. It's forming a beautiful courtyard. I think it's an extremely small unit, so whoever's going to live back there in a secondary dwelling unit is going to definitely use that courtyard aspect, and it seems to me that it turns itself away from the neighbors, so the neighbors are actually getting some privacy from that internalization of the courtyard. The landscaping around the neighborhood, a lot of people have the entire front of their right-of-way paved the entire width, and I just will appreciate that they're going to take away paving. We don't seem to have residential requirements on other groups to come in and show their landscape. I don't disagree with it would be desirable to have some mitigation from parking on that new area there, but I'm not sure exactly how far to take that. I'm pretty libertarian about stuff. I think people have a right to build. This fits in with a lot of different aspects. It maybe isn't the way I would choose to build, but I can see some certain logic there. So I'm not as opposed as my peers are. I do think the front door is still too exposed. I wish there was something of a small version, like the large version you're doing, that just help to frame the front door a little bit. It looks like it's very flat there, whereas the side, the two-story side, that's incredible. I kind of like how simple the singular pitch is. If anything, I would say if you go back and look at it, I would just make the back simpler. I mean, you're showing trusses in here. I don't think you've got more than one or two trusses. It's going to be stick-built because there's so many angles and things in there. So a single span across the relatively minor span would almost be simpler. I don't have to tell you, I don't understand where's crawl space and where's elevated and where's slab on grade. It looks to me like the drawings that Commissioner Lure was referencing, the thing is slab on grade, but if you look at the framing plans, it looks like there's framing. So I would say I support the slab on grade project if it would go forward. But those are my comments.
Okay, Susan?
I don't have a whole lot to add, except that I do walk that neighborhood a lot, and I walk by houses there that, I count them. There are, up to 8 or more vehicles, cars, boats, trucks, all in front of one home. So, I do appreciate the idea of pulling back from that. I don't quite know what that's all about and how that happens and whether that is a code violation. I mean, how many vehicles can one household have? But, that's what they've got, and they're all parked there. And they stack them. They're stacked, 3 deep.
Just depends on where it's at and what the configuration is, as to whether it's acceptable or not.
Yeah. And the shape of the lot is strange, and it's an interesting way that back area is going. I agree with that curved courtyard area. It's a small unit, but there are people who would want just a small unit. The roof line is a little challenging, if maybe there's a way to make that a little more streamlined somehow, so it's not going up and down in the back. And again, we'd certainly like to see people do the right thing from the start, but it's sometimes hard to know what the right thing is. And it's not always easy to find out what the right thing is by looking on our city's, planning pages, and it's complex. So, as our director said, coming forward, this is the remediation for having not done it correctly. And that's expensive. Buying a house is expensive, doing any, fixing and additions to it is expensive too, so. I'd be willing to move forward on this. If, staff has looked closely at it, feels that it's an appropriate changes in use of the space, I could go with it.
Okay, I've been designing buildings since before there was dirt, and I'm having trouble figuring out what was there, what wasn't there. You've got a site plan here that was dated. It was dated. The 11/15/18. It's a topo survey and shows a raised wood deck. This shows a shed, and this was existing probably at the point where they came in to do the remedial. So it appears to me that they had built a wood deck there, and then in this format, and so what they're doing is they're putting the ADU on top of it. You look at the foundation plans, and you're showing piers, spaced 3.5 feet apart for perimeter piers, and then some piers spaced 2 foot along where that wood deck is. Okay. I do not know a soils engineer that allow you to have isolated piers, So, this is obviously, I've never seen a soils engineer that allow you to put in isolated piers even for a single story structure. So this obviously hasn't had a soils report done on it yet.
Well, it would still need to go through a building permit. I did talk to the building inspector about it because I've never seen a foundation that looks like a deck before. So
Yeah.
I think it's possible, but it would have to go through structural and soils engineer and building review.
And the project's conditions require a soils report,
Okay.
which is standard for single-family homes. We don't usually get them before we go to planning.
So that's this hodgepodge of, actually, it's kind of like a fun house with the layout and the site plan layouts of what we got here. And it's essentially a hodgepodge that they're trying to conform to the existing structure there, to put the ADU on to save money, and I can understand that. And I'm not against that, I just don't think it's really well designed to do that. If you're going to do unequal walls and angled walls, then you don't do trusses. It makes it really hard to run a straight ridge. If you're going to do that, you're going to do a single shed roof. So much easier construction, much easier to deal with. You're going to have a variable pitch across this whole ADU because your walls are not equally spaced from your ridge. So either you vary the pitch or you vary the height of the wall plates. So I don't know where we have. Okay, I'm in a conundrum here. I don't know where we have the ability to, in a building that's conforming to the setbacks and the height requirements, where we, especially in a backyard, where we have the ability, even with our design guidelines, to say, this needs really another look at it and needs to come back with a more comprehensive, cohesive plan, because they fit inside the box, essentially. And it's not for us to tell them that you should be using a different building system. So from the front side, where I can tell them, architectural design guidelines, and where I feel comfortable at, is that front door is just stuck on like a postage stamp. It needs to have a front porch attached to that, and it needs to be delineated much more like the existing deck, and tie that together as such. The landscape plan needs to be completely rethought, and we need to have a verified landscape plan for this front that would confirm that it will not become a parking lot in the future. I'm not comfortable with a gravel lot out front. So I think we need to condition this at least to have a landscape plan that is at least approved by you, Scott, the community director, with the pure intent of not having it able to revert back into a parking lot.
So we do have a condition that says no parking shall occur within rock landscape area as shown on the approved plans.
Right, and 3 years from now, who's going to be reading those conditions?
Well, it's an enforcement issue. I mean, that whole neighborhood is.
Yeah.
We also have a requirement for a landscape and irrigation plan shall be designed in accordance with the State Department of Water Resources Model Efficient Landscape Ordinance as applicable.
And I think we just need to add to that and to be approved by the Community Development Director.
Okay.
And so the intent that I would like to see the commission direct to you is to have it so that it's physically harder to revert to a parking lot. So, and that can be easily done with trees or with a small, Allen block wall or something like that. Or, yeah, asphalt curb, something like that.
But gotta throw something back in here. So, I hadn't actually even looked at the floor framing, roof framing plan very closely, or at all, to be honest with you. So, kind of looking at that, it doesn't seem viable for a couple of different reasons. As Commissioner Lohr's talking about, a lack of a grade beam, lack of symmetry in the roof, and then the irregularly shaped structure. I think once you start going to try to shear this building from an engineering perspective, I think you're going to run into some pretty specific engineering problems for the irregularly shaped structure. And if hypothetically they were able to get this A, engineered, and B, through plan check, I would be surprised, A. B, I don't think they're going to be able to do that without some redesign. And at that point, I would say, I would think I would want to see it again if there is a redesign.
Yeah. So, go ahead, Joseph, I'm sorry.
So what I'm hearing is that we're trying to construct some sort of a solution where this project will come back before us, is that?
Well, what I was getting at was if we approve this today, and if it's not viable, which I would, like I say, my professional instincts tell me that there would need to be some redesign to this to make it work, I would want to see it again possibly, because I wouldn't want to just blanketly approve, do whatever you want to do over there.
Well, my question had to, because it seems to me that the existing shed with the bathroom, which was the focus of my interest, might turn out to be totally unacceptable standing on itself, and then even more so when connected to the rest of this new construction. And I wonder if it might save everybody a lot of time and money if some sort of city inspector might be able to take a look at the property before they go through the expense of all these additional designs to get that basic fact out of the way.
So we did look at it, and the answer to that question is you need to qualify your work, period. I mean, that's what this is all about. That's why that's why you have to go through building, because they haven't gotten to that point yet. There are different ways to make it happen, okay? There's not just one way to build something. And so that's what, they haven't gotten to that point yet because they don't have a soils report, they're not doing their engineering yet, they're not doing their structural. So we'll get that later, and that'll tell them where they need to go, and then they'll come forward with a solution that picks that stuff up. We don't typically do that up front, and nor would I ever consider doing that in relation to a single-story development at the rear of a lot. Yeah. For a planning permit approval, that's a little over the top, and that's very expensive work, to have done up front if they're not going to get approval, or if they maybe weren't going to get approval, that type of thing. So.
Scott, let me, this isn't a condition, this is just, to me, from me to you as a recommendation, as far as you're trying to do this as economically as possible and, to bring it in under budget, and I appreciate that. If I looked at this project right now and you asked for my opinion, which you're not, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, I would tell you to scrape it. What you've got there, scrape it. You're going to be cheaper, it's going to be better, you're going to be able to build it faster. If you scrape this, come back in, trench, do slab on grade, and do a more of a conforming ADU in the back. And you'll be miles ahead in the long run. Now that's just me off the cuff giving some advice. Me as a planning commissioner, I can't tell you to do that. So that's kind of where I sit. I think so where do we want to go with this? Do we want to condition it? Do we want to deny it? Do we want to continue it?
I'm tempted to ask the applicant if they think, if they want us to continue it. I would think they might want us to, because what I'm seeing here, this doesn't seem practical to engineer. So they may want to take another stab at it.
But that's not our job. Won't they find that out as they go through the process?
It would be their decision.
After a lot more money.
They will, and I would imagine if they find out that the design they've come up with to try to make use of the existing deck configuration that's out there doesn't work, I don't know why you would build it in that configuration moving forward. Meaning, if you're required to do, as Chair Luer suggested, and you got to that point, you'd be like, oh, we need to scrape this and start over. You wouldn't put it in that configuration, right? I mean, I I don't think they would want to do that because that doesn't make sense because you got the weird angles. They're just trying to make use of what's there and to make it fit. I can appreciate why they're doing it. At that point, then maybe we do end up back here if they have to redesign it and it comes back with something that makes more sense from that standpoint when you consider there's nothing there, they're not trying to make use of anything. But we don't know that yet. They've at least done enough work to get to this point where they think there's a shot at being able to do it, otherwise we probably wouldn't be here.
Okay, so Scott, should we, I'm looking for your recommendation on this, should we open it up to ask them what they would?
Sure, yeah.
They would, okay, we'll open up public comment, we'll ask the applicant where, you've heard our comments up here, and so essentially you've heard our sentiments, needless to say, we're trying to be helpful, but we have our job to do too. So would you like us to deny, to have the opportunity to deny the project, then you can take it to the city council on appeal? Would you rather have us continue the project? You can continue further on in your investigations with engineering, and if this is the formula you want to come back with, then you can come back with us and say that you've done those investigations and you're happy with that, and this is your hard set in stone, and then we'll give you our appraisal then, or do you want us to condition this with a pile of conditions to go forward? So
thank you for the opportunity to come back, and there was a couple notes I made. The engineering, we have engineering done on it. We submitted for building at the same time because we wanted to get some kind of feedback from Chad, and he's looked at it. He said there is not anything major that he sees, but we submitted engineering because we knew it was required. When we met with Chad before submitting to CDP, we wanted to make sure that we're doing everything correctly the first time. So he told us that we needed engineering. We hired an engineer. We got all the calcs and everything and submitted. So that's there. And another thing I wanted to say, the doors, windows, and all that work, we got permit before we put them in. We did not do it before permit.
Great.
And there's inspection card that's been signed right after. And another item, you mentioned that it could be a flip. My friend Hadi, he used to be my boss when I came to U.S. and when I was 16. That was my first job. I've known him ever since. And he's lived here with his family on Hemlock. I'm not from Morro Bay. I'm from Fresno. We used to be in Fresno. And I moved to Orange County. I live in Laguna Beach. And he was struggling here. He didn't know what to do. I have a construction background. I studied construction management. I'm also licensed. So he ran out of money and didn't know what to do. So that's when I got involved and met with everybody to see what the problem is. Let me come up with some solution and also bring some cash to bring the house up to par. So the plan is that he's going to live, he's got 3 kids and a wife, and this house is a 3-bedroom, there's an office. He's going to live in the main unit. My family's in Fresno. I have 2 brothers with kids, wives. I live in Laguna Beach. So this is the middle point where I can come to. I'm not going to be full-time at that ADU unit, but when I come here, I'll have a place. My brothers, when they want to come here to the beach, they can come here and use that place. So that's the idea of why I got involved, and also to help him. I wanted to also clarify that the shower, I did not build it. If you look at it, there's no shower in there. It's a freestanding unit that we purchased from Amazon, and it gets delivered, and you put it in, plug it in. So it's not connected to the building. It's just freestanding, floating there. And it's just a shower unit. There's covers all around it, the top and the sides. It's just one unit. You walk into it, it's a steam shower type of thing. So just wanted to clarify that you're clear that we didn't do the doors, windows, and all that stuff before getting a permit for it. And the shower basically was a plug and go kind of thing. So we didn't do construction in the back.
How do you want us to proceed?
I'd like to proceed with it if we could.
So would you rather us continue it to a date uncertain, and you can continue your, if this is the way you want to, if this is the plan you want to proceed with, that way it'll allow you to get do you have a soils report?
Soils report I need to get, I don't have soils
Okay.
report.
I think you would be more informed after a soils report, after you get a soils report. So
Can we do that?
So what I'm hearing is you want to proceed with, you would like to proceed with this plan. So I think what we'll do is we'll continue, I would see probably the best way for you, my recommendation is we will continue to a date uncertain. You can continue your investigations with further investing money in this with the soils report and getting further along in your building plans. And then when you're further along and you're confident that that's what it is, then we would then have another hearing.
Okay. I'm not very familiar with the time frame. Are we talking like another month that we would?
It would be when I would say I wouldn't not until your soils engineer approves the plans and we see, I would resubmit with engineering stamps and engineering calculations. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, then I think you'd be comfortable to come back. So, Scott,
It's up to you. I mean, certainly that you can do that. You can condition it to move forward. I mean, he has to provide that information anyway. And you can just simply condition it that if the design of the project changes substantially, which it could, then it needs to come back for review by the planning commission, which is fine. It's the same process. If everything's fine, and he said he did structural, and we do. I just confirmed with Nancy that we do have something in-house. I don't exactly know what that is. Obviously, it's not a full submittal to us, so he probably, sounds like he did talk with the building inspector, plans examiner. Again, I don't know what that conversation entailed or what that review entailed. If he didn't submit actual applications, we're not going to spend a whole bunch of time going through it. You need to pay us.
Submit it.
I don't know what we've done on it. I'm not sure. So if he's comfortable moving forward and he thinks he has the plans, then certainly if the commission's willing, let him do it, and I'm happy to bring it back if it results in substantial changes, if he can't do what he thinks he can do. I mean, I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And that would just put us right back where we would be, other than continuing it. If he is okay, he can move forward. If the commission's okay with that, then we can do that, and then if it's substantial changes, we'll bring it back.
What about application fees? Excuse me, just a second. Would the application fees to resubmit if there's substantial changes, would that be more than if we continue it?
I'm going to ask the applicant a question.
Okay, yes.
So did you submit your building plans to
Yeah,
building?
we submitted 5 copies. I think building actually is 3 copies. So
Okay.
3 copies, and we submitted, I actually put it on my credit card, personal credit card.
Okay,
because-
so he has actually submitted an application to us. It looks like it's missing some things, and we're probably in holding pattern until this issue here is resolved, so.
Okay, we did open it up for public comment, so I will give the neighbors one representative to come forward and just address. Please.
We've got this freestanding bathroom shed converted into a bathroom that we witnessed him doing. At the same time, he's building on this deck that he's proposing, I think. I haven't seen the plans.
Yeah.
But he's building this.
You need to stay at the.
He's building this ADU onto this deck that we watched him just dig holes and sink 4x4s in, okay? That probably are about 6 feet high off the top of the deck. Puts some metal tent structures up, cover with tarps, had a big screen TV, a double bed, okay? This is where this whole thing was going. And now from what your plans are saying, he's going to build onto this deck with 4x4s stuck in the ground. There's no foundation.
Okay, great, thank you. And then we're going to close to public comment at this point. Okay, guys, where do you want to go with this?
You know, I would be kind of tempted to recommend moving forward with it, because they are going to have to go through the process of getting soils engineers, regular engineers, they're going to be inspected, they're, you know, it's going to throw them into the serious world of being compliant with what codes are. I think it would also be worth conditioning maybe a more comprehensive landscaping plan, and I would certainly like to see a much more even roof line plan in the back, you know, something that's not, because just looking at some of these images, and I'm not an architect or a builder or any of that, but it looks really choppy and uneven. So that's going to require some work on their part and the part of their designers and engineers. So, but feels like I don't quite know what is to be gained by continuing this and having it come back with work that they're going to have to do if we go forward with it anyhow. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Okay, Joseph?
Yeah, I think I would agree, again, particularly with respect to the inspector on the existing shed. I think given the level of community interest here, I think the inspector will have more than his usual incentive to do a really thorough job. And my only question is, because this is an accessory dwelling unit and the limitations that the state imposes on that, can you think we can actually lower the prescribed lowering the height of it?
I'm not sure what the point of lowering the height of the structure would be. Honestly, I'm not sure what that's achieving. It's, would you say 11 feet tall? I mean, that's not overly tall. I mean, it approximately matches the single level height of the existing home, right?
Just make it all.
Yeah, well,
it's not all that much off. So I mean, like I don't know that I don't know that you're gaining a lot there.
Well, I'm not even sure I was suggesting that. The question was, I wasn't sure we even had the authority to do that because this is an accessory dwelling unit.
You have architectural review authority over the structure, you know, and if that's a perceived issue, then that's fine. The neighbors that are unhappy with it are behind it and can see it. So, I mean, I sort of understand what they were saying, you know, but I mean, for the most part, you know, it's not visible, so.
Okay, Jesse?
I really don't know how to proceed here. I mean, I agree with Susan here. If they want to go forward with it, go forward with it. It just doesn't look structurally viable, to be completely frank with you, and I'm trying to be helpful. There's inconsistencies within the plan. I don't see how embedded lumber is going to obtain any shear value, and you know, short of scraping, I don't know how you fix these types of structural incompatibilities with you know, current codes. Given that, I'm tempted just to go with it too, and if you have to scrape it, then you have to come back.
Can we condition demolition on something that hasn't been inspected?
I think you can condition the project similarly, like we have, you know, if they are required to, you know, if they come back and they have to redesign the entirety of that rear portion of the structure, then we need to bring that back to you. That's fine, and we can put that as a condition into the project. It's not a big deal. We have the minor mod condition that allows me to approve minor changes. That would be a change to the entirety of the project that's sitting in front of you for the most part. So I think that's fine. I think that's fair.
No, I'd be willing to condition it if we do something with the front that involves erecting a stoop and something that's 2 to 3 feet deep that has some kind of detail similarity to the larger deck that they're proposing to the west. I'm happy if it's a monoslope roof in the back that's a single pitch that goes toward what I assume is going to be retained as a courtyard kind of element. As long as they don't get to the edge, go past the building footprint setbacks, I don't really care about the shape. But I would like to see the demolition of the illegally constructed portions.
Susan, did you have a chance on this? Did I give you a chance? Okay. Okay, I think I'm coming around to the point that we can approve it with these major conditions. That, it's going to get a soils report. It's going to need to get a structural engineer that will sign off on those footings. So that should happen in building. If it doesn't happen in building, it should be condition 2.
That's where it happens.
Yep. Then as far as planning, the planning conditions, I don't think we can condition it as such, but I would recommend a single slope roof to the ADU unit. The front entry needs to have a porch roof extending out from the front, a minimum of 4 feet. And I think, are we in setback there?
I think there's plenty of, isn't there plenty of room?
Not with post. Post can't drop.
Oh, it's an odd angle.
Yeah, we might have.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we did it to...
Because that deck protrudes out from...
So we could do, if we did 4 feet, then that would probably still work, because we could have, if there was a post support or something back, it would be out of the setback. So there's room, so that's fine, yeah, we can make 4 feet work.
Okay, and then with the landscaping condition, that it has physical barriers to prevent future parking, and to have the landscape plan approved by you, Scott, the community director, development director.
Okay.
Okay, any other conditions?
I have a question for Scott. I don't know if we can do this or not. May we condition the project that it be reviewed by one of the consulting firms that the city uses for plan check?
I mean, I think that's not really the purview of the commission.
Right.
No,
I get that. I get that. Just given the structural irregularities and
I mean, like I said, what I'm going to do is, literally tomorrow, I'm going to talk to Chad about it, because I didn't realize that we had full structural plans from them, and so I was just going to go over it with them. So
Okay.
I think I don't have any issue related to, our ability to review the plans. It's not that complicated.
And I didn't mean to impugn,
I understand where you're going with it, but I don't like sending things out to, for plan check services if I don't have to. This is something that I'm completely comfortable with us doing the plan check on.
Okay, so any other conditions that, Joseph, you mentioned something about, more inspection on the bathroom fixtures?
Well, that would suggest that there's something wrong with the current level of inspection, so I don't want to suggest that.
Okay.
So no, I'm confident, given the attention we've drawn to this, and as I say, the community interest, that the inspection will be done as usual and very thorough.
Okay. Okay, do we have a motion? Yeah.
I move we approve conditional use permit CUP 18-07, coastal development permit CDP 18-010, and parking exception PKG 18-0-3, approving the new ADU deck, 137 square foot addition and exterior improvements at 982 Carmel Street with the following modifications. Landscape plan, showing clear separation and lack of ability to park and restriction on parking into the landscape area, monopitch roof in the back on the new structure, the inclusion of at least a 4-foot deep porch to the front door, and is there anything else?
I think that's it.
I think that's it.
Is there anything, and then we're going to, and of course, the soils report to be reviewed.
For that.
And that'll be done through plan check. So,
I will second that motion.
okay, I think we had the discussions. Anybody want to add anything further? Okay, good. Please call the question.
Commissioner Lucas?
Aye.
Commissioner Stewart?
Aye.
Commissioner Barone?
Aye.
Commissioner Ingraffia?
Aye.
Chair Lure?
Yes. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, guys. Okay. 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 Okay, item number C is new business. We have none. Item number D is unfinished business. We have none. Item E is planning commissioner comments and future agenda items.
I've got one from the communication we got from the Krauses about the relaxed codes for all the RVs, boats, trailers, and parking. I wondered if...
Excuse me. Excuse me, could you please go into the lobby? I'm sorry, and thank you for all your comments. Thank you guys for your inputs.
Anyhow, I don't know if that's something we agendized to rediscuss here, or if that just needs to go directly to council, but I figured I'd bring it up since it came to our attention.
It's entirely up to the council at this point. It's sitting on their plate, and they have to make that decision. They've made the decision not to pick it up the last couple of years through goal setting, and so we're carrying forward policies into the new codes, and, with some tweaks. I think you might recall we've got rousing taller fences in front yards and things like that, but those sections remain largely unchanged, and so it might simply be that, the council decides to take up a discussion and allows us to move forward with how we were doing it with enforcement. The pushback came from the folks that we sent letters to that said they were not compliant. That wasn't much of a surprise. When you send out a bunch of letters to folks telling them they're not compliant, they show up to the council meeting, and then the council's like, well, maybe we need to talk about it some more, but haven't made it, not that it's not important to them, but it's, you have to prioritize. We can only do so much. That's the issue, right? We're running on so many different lanes right now. I have a water reclamation facility. We're updating general plan, LCP, zoning code. These are all big initiatives that take a lot of time, and so these things rise to the top as other things move out of the way. And right now, we're not having other things move out of the way. There's actually more stuff being piled on top. We're getting ready to start the housing element update, and we're going to be starting the climate action plan updates, and all these things are coming down the road. So it's sort of prioritizing those things, and sometimes it doesn't make it.
And one thing I think, I'd take this opportunity just to let the public know, use the system, because if you send that little message, on the left side of the city website that there's a hedge, I can't see around it when I'm trying to make a left turn or a right turn. If there's a RV that's constantly parked on the corner and I can't see. I think there's a very good responsiveness on the part of the city to specific issues. And it's not like you've got to be a rat on your neighbor all the time, but some of these things really are safety issues. And I do see people parking in the street when they could be up on the berm a little more. So, outside of a police state, I just think, go ahead and talk to your neighbor if you can, but sometimes it's not your neighbor. You don't know. You just know that every time I drive down this street and try and make a right turn, I cannot see to turn on Piney Way or whatever. So go ahead and report that. And let them deal with it.
We like that. I mean,
Yeah.
we like it when things are reported, especially through the system that's online, the service request system. It pushes into our work order system, even for our public works crews. We just recently made that connection. It didn't before, we had to do it manually, but now it's automatic, which is fantastic. And it pushes forward to code enforcement automatically, so it runs into that. We just now did that. We upgraded the system and changed it a little bit recently, so we'll be probably rolling that out more, in a larger manner to folks moving forward, but we are doing that. We have improved the system, so our responsiveness is pretty good on stuff like that.
It's been quicker, I think.
So Scott, this would be a good point to remind the public that they can, if they see unpermitted work being done in their neighborhood, to ask about it.
They should always contact us, and to that point, any property that has ongoing, that has permitted work will have an orange sign, bright orange sign in the front of it that says permit across the top of it. That's issued by the city. In all jobs where we've issued building permits, they're required to have those posted. And if they don't have that, then they probably don't have a permit. So you should definitely give us a call so we can drive by there and take a look.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that you certainly don't require the caller to identify himself. These things could be done anonymously, right?
Yes, if you go online and click the button or download the app that goes with it, you can take pictures of cracks in the sidewalk, potholes in the street, or leave messages and say unpermitted work happening here, and you don't have to log in any sort of identification for yourself if you don't want follow-up. If you want follow-up, you got to let us have some information so we can follow up, but if you don't, then that's fine. You can just do it anonymously. That's one of the options.
And once again, this is not being nosy neighbor, it's not being malicious to, there are serious health and safety issues, especially with unpermitted bathrooms. You have all of the black water situations, you have, people trying to do, unpermitted gray water installations that are not, that are not sanitary.
Well, there are things with wiring, fire hazards.
That's one of our biggest issues is.
I think it's always good to ask the question.
Right.
So ask the question, does this have a permit? It doesn't make you a rat, it just means you're asking to be sure that your neighborhood is safe. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
I have another one, I've got lots of them. Wondered what it might take to get our city's favorite sidewalk sign type thing created for the Saturday Community Farmers Market to be put at the bottom of Centennial Stairway to indicate farmers market this afternoon, 2 to 5, whatever the time is, just to let folks on the waterfront know that there's an event happening, something that would be brought down there, maybe Saturday morning and brought back up Saturday evening. Is that something that could be permitted? Because I know in all the old and new, there's no sandwich board signs, but this is kind of more of an event sign, so
that could be something that they could approach us for. It's a limited time thing that could be incorporated into the permit that exists for the farmer's market.
Okay.
So not opposed to things like that. I think it's good to let people know that we have things going on and they might want to go to.
All right, I'll let them know that.
Okay, Jesse?
Just want to let everybody know, there was a WRFCAC meeting. I was unable to attend today at 3. But they talked about the submission of the concept design report for the new WRF and talked about the groundwater modeling. And I wasn't able to attend the meeting, so I don't know the outcome of that, but I'm sure that'll be available from our nice AV folks here very shortly. At any rate, what I was hoping to do is tell the commission about the new report, and B, ask Scott if we can maybe agendize a discussion on that in the next meeting, if that's appropriate.
For the next meeting? Okay. I need some of you to nod your heads, please.
Okay. Yes.
In case there is a discussion, if the commission reads this independently and we want to discuss it, that would be the appropriate way to do it, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, I could just agendize it as like a business item type thing on there, if you want to discuss it. I mean, is that what you want to do? I mean, or...
Did you want to do a presentation?
Well, I really want to just, A, let the commission know that it exists, and B, if they wanted to read it and comment on it, and we can discuss it and forward recommendations or comments to the WRF-CAC, that would be the appropriate way to do that and have that discussion, so that...
Well, we could do it at this point on planning commission, comments.
It's up to, I can put it on the agenda so you can take a look at it and you can have a conversation about it. It really probably should be more of a conversation directed by your representative on the WRF-CAC, Mr. Barone. So maybe you and I can have a conversation about what that looks like. Because the planning commission itself doesn't necessarily have a job as it relates to where we're at in this process. In fact, our overall permitting is going to be in July, happening with a consolidated permit with the Coastal Commission in San Luis Obispo. So it won't be coming before this board for permitting. It's actually, the plant itself is located in the county, but we're consolidating all of it, all of the infrastructure that goes, the piping, the demo at the existing plant site, the lift stations, all of that's in the city, all of it's being consolidated with a coastal development permit through the Coastal Commission and the plant itself, so as to avoid the serial meeting, appeal, meeting, appeal at the county, at the city, and then it all ended like at the coastal anyway. We tried to do this so we could just do it once, and everybody can come to the meeting and have their say, and one and done, that type of thing.
Okay, so whether that's a presentation or a discussion item?
So yeah, I think maybe I can work with Jesse, and maybe he can bring up some salient points that he sees out of what he brings, and just have the discussion with the commission on things like that. I think that would be like an appropriate, focused discussion as opposed to like opening it up to the world.
Okay, I think that'd be informative.
That makes sense? Okay.
I just want to make sure I give everybody a chance we could talk about it in the group, and...
I think that's good. That's what I think we can make that happen. Thank you.
And then, Scott, where are we, just for a timeline, I looked at future planning items and stuff, and I didn't see the items that we were looking at, the general, the GP update. Where are we sitting with that?
So, general plan LCP, we're still going over the comments from Coastal. The difficulty in it is we got comments on the draft that you last all reviewed, and it was from multiple staff members in an edit format that wasn't kind of done holistically, so everybody didn't really know what everybody else was saying, and so now we have our point of contact, which is Sarah Carbo. She's fantastic to work with, but she's relatively new. And some of the context from the folks that have been there a long time, Dan Carl, lack context. She's like, I don't really know where that's coming from, and so they have to go up the ladder to get information back on some of these things. So there's this laundry list of things that we need to get responses back, and we're going to be meeting with Sarah, hopefully, and at least at a minimum, Kevin Kahn, one of the supervising planners, to go over those last several items that Sarah was unable to obtain answers for. When we get that, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, it might be 3 because I'm going on vacation. When we get that, then we'll be taking that back in, taking all the input that you last gave, and wrapping that all up into our final draft of Plan Morro Bay. You'll be reviewing it. My guess is that'll take a couple meetings. And then you'll be making a recommendation to council, and then council will be reviewing it and overseeing it. That'll be along with the EIR. The zoning code they're not even looking at it right now. We sent it to them in October, and they haven't looked at it. So this process is taking a lot longer than we'd anticipated, and I think some of it is, on coastal side of it is just a lack of staff available to do the review, because it's not insignificant. The GPLCP 350 pages with glossary. Zoning code is about 320 pages, with definitions and stuff like that. So they're not small documents, and so it takes them a long time to get through it, but it's definitely taking a long time to get through them.
And then the short-term vacation rental business is in the queue after that, right?
Follow up after that, yes. I need to break one of these things loose and get done with it so I have the capacity to review some of these other things, because we're literally going to be rolling right into the housing element update. We're going to start writing the RFP within the next month for it.
And then, so is the commercial design guidelines, is that getting buried further down the list, or?
It might be getting a little further down the list at this point. I was hoping to be able to kind of roll it out I was hoping to be done with most of the general plan LCP stuff by now. We were supposed to be done at the end of the year. But not to be, and so a little unclear. I mean, this is sort of hanging everything up. There's a lot of other things I'd like to be working on as well, and not able to really do it because of the amount of time it takes. I mean, Cindy, Jason, and myself spend hours and hours on this stuff, going through the comments with Coastal and putting it all together and managing the grants, and there's a lot of time involved with it, and it's ongoing. I mean, it's thousands of hours at this point, probably, staff level time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Scott, have you heard, did the Navy ever come down on a definitive position on the offshore lease sites for the wind farm?
We have a meeting with Castle to discuss that specific item, Castle Wind, all Weinstein. Gosh, is it later this week? Let me look at my calendar. Give me 1 second. We are meeting with them on...
Okay. Let's go now.
I don't see it. I thought it was this week. I don't know. We have one coming up here pretty soon. It's not showing up on my calendar here, but sometimes the one when it doesn't necessarily push all this stuff through onto my laptop sometimes. We do have one coming up here in the next week or so, I thought. And that's one of the things that was going to be a briefing on that specific subject, was bringing us up to speed about where the Navy stands on some of those things. We've been working through the legislature and through both the state and federal government on this to try to push this rock up the hill. And it seems like we're getting a little bit of a loosening of the thought process on the side of the Navy, because, everybody's supporting this type of development. So hopefully that continues to be the case, and we'll be able to get something broken loose and moving forward. So, yeah, it's actually Thursday. I'm sorry.
Before I forget to mention, it's possible I'm going to miss the second July meeting, but I'll know by the first July meeting whether or not I'm going to be here for that second one, but I'll just kind of...
Okay.
Can I sit in your chair?
You may sit.
Okay, Scott, is there anything you want to say?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, everybody. At this point, we'll adjourn to the next regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting at the Veterans Memorial Building on 209 Surf Street at June 18th, 2019 at 6 p.m.